Thank you.
Sidewalks and the ordinance. Huh.
All right.
Up to $25 fine.
Well, you know, this is one of my talking points for it.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Y'all can share us toes.
You still beating that dead horse.
Oh, you quick, this horse will come back. I got a partner now. Only we're gonna make it look big.
I'll get a doctor block.
You're recording. I'd like to call to order the July 6th, 2023 Columbia Borough Council work session. Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilperson Zink.
Here.
Councilperson Kaufman.
Here.
Councilperson Stahl.
Here.
Councilperson Fisher.
Here.
Councilperson Price.
Here.
Councilperson Whitman.
Here.
Councilperson Millard.
Oh, I'm sorry, hi. Here.
All right. Would anybody like to offer an invocation? If you'd like to, please rise for a moment of silent reflection. Local Salvers, would you like to lead us in a pledge, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Announcement of executive and information sessions. There were none. Are there any additions, deletions, or reorganization of the agenda needed? I don't believe so. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda as published?
Second.
I have a motion by Councilperson Kaufman, second by Councilperson Stahl to approve the agenda as published. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right. Citizen comment, non-agenda items only. Is there anyone that would like to, Bill, you're here on the street trees?
Yes.
All right, and Mary McKinley. Good evening. Couple items here. 3462. Is that going to be Middleton? It is our understanding it is. I noticed that 12th Street's been done, Grinnell Avenue's been done. One of the things that brought this to mind is they were going through the same thing down in Lancaster, and I was down there last Thursday, and the area there near the old Hamilton Washington West End out to Riggs Avenue was in the same condition as ours 2 months ago, and that's a complete mill and overlay there within the last month and a half. And we're still waiting out there, just comments. I think part of the issue why you see the differences between the different streets is UGI uses several different contractors. So what one contractor's time frame, that's why you see several different of the flaggers, like right. Depending on the contractor is who they have for the flaggers.
I think it's just that we put up with this now for how long?
Oh,
it's getting ridiculous. It's getting ridiculous. Okay, moving on. Fireworks. I'd like to thank the public works guys that were down there on Wednesday cleaning up the river park. They were cleaning off the dock. There seemed to be a launching platform for
fireworks. We came up and was sitting up above the old bridge piers to watch Wrightsville. And the amount of fireworks that were going off from the dock at Columbia River Park was ridiculous. I'll say it didn't match Wrightsville's. It was maybe a quarter to a third, but there were crowds of people down there. We saw fireworks at one point went out, ricocheted off the water, and came back into shore. On our boat, we had some emergency people that deal with emergency situations. There was a call went into county control to ask to have someone come down. As far as we know, there was nothing done. It continued, and it continued. It was insane. We've got, my granddaughter has video. If anyone will care to see it, I'll get a hold of what went on down there that evening, just a very short video. There were fireworks that were that large that they were going above the bridge and going off. We left people off on that dock when we were headed back down to the island. You guys know me, you know. One of the guys had a pair of Crocs on. He ended up with an ash burning his foot that came through that kind of flipped into his Crocs. The situation down there, it can't happen again. I am surprised somebody was not hurt. There were people down there, we had ash on our cars. We were sitting there worried about what was happening to our vehicles down there. And there's a building there. So with the borough's ordinance on fireworks, there should not have been fireworks being put off on that dock or in that park. I'm sorry, I actually made notes here so that I won't forget what I wanted to do. Look at the next day, LMP, the articles they had in about fireworks. What our state legislators have done to us, they're looking at the dollars, they're not looking at the safety, and I know you, thank you for letting me vent. But this is getting insane. We have never seen anything like that in all the years that we have been on that river. We come up, bring the pontoon up, sit above, between the two bridges, the 30 and the 462, and watch Wrightsville. We have never seen that. There were fireworks going up in what we call Mecca. Okay, we're supposing there weren't a lot of people up there. That's a big open space up there. But in that river park, with the number of vehicles, the number of people, and the amount of fireworks that was going off, it was, I sat out there on Tuesday night and I said, you know what? I wasn't coming to council this week, but you know what? I got a reason to go now. And then when I saw the agenda, I do some of the important job items here. But thank you for allowing me to vent, but it was terrible. I am surprised somebody wasn't hurt or there wasn't serious property damage done. That floating dock looks like crap. Thank you.
Mayor Lutz.
Sure. You will hear a little bit about that very shortly, Mary.
Thank you.
Uh,
Or do you want Corporal Savage to go first?
Yeah, we'll have Corporal Savage go first. I personally was not working night shift over the 3rd or 4th of July, but I got some numbers that were compiled by the shift supervisors that were working. I do not know if anyone was cited at River Park. I don't have specific locations, but I can say over the July 3rd and 4th, we received 26 fireworks complaints. 9 of those were officer initiated. Out of those, there was 18 contacts with people that we actually found setting off fireworks. There were 14 citations issued under the Borough ordinance and 4 warnings. And the weekend before the 4th of July, wasn't quite as busy as the 3rd and 4th, but there was probably about 10 fireworks complaints, and the ones that were located, those ended up being warnings.
Thank you.
That's I told the chief yesterday when he gave me the number, that's the most citations written on fireworks that I can remember in 20 some years I've been around here. So, and I think you guys addressed the problem. You know, we talked about it many times. When you hear a boom, it's too late.
Yep.
You know, so, and that's where the warnings came from, when they saw evidence. They couldn't pin it who to cite. 14 citations. I think last year we only had 1 or 2 citations. As Dave said, don't know about River Park. But addressing River Park, Mark and I talked this morning, and the chief and I talked later on, regarding fireworks. Mary mentioned Wrightsville. We've beat this around for years, Mary, you probably remember, about us getting with Wrightsville, and maybe even Marietta, but especially Wrightsville. Why can't Columbia and Wrightsville get together and set off fireworks out over the river? We tried the bridge one time, they wouldn't let us use the bridge because of Homeland Security. But we certainly, I remember when I was a kid, there was a floating barge out there and we set off fireworks off of the barge. I think it's high time, and I feel relatively certain that Wrightsville would be willing to work with us to do this. And I'm sure within Columbia and wonderful organizations we have in Columbia could come up with the funding to put on a real nice fireworks display out on the river, you know, for Columbia, Wrightsville. If we're occupying it doing fireworks, then they're not going to be setting them off there.
Right.
So, and I think if there's some, if the community is setting off fireworks, some people may be more inclined to save their money and use it for something more important than just blowing it up, coming down to watch the fireworks.
Right.
So we're going to make an attempt at that and see if we can do that and solve some of that problem. So here, you know, between now and next year, we'll be getting with Wrightsville and our service organizations and seeing if we can't do the fund drive or whatever and make that work.
Well, I was talking to Mark about that briefly today. I said I really like that idea. And then, I mean, the Merchants Association can run with it and,
Yeah.
you know, come up with a day of specials or whatever they want to do, and, you know.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity to solve as much as we can part of this problem we have, but it's another opportunity to bring visitors into the community. You know, they'll come into the community, they'll come in before dark, and they'll go to the restaurants and whatever have you, and so we'll have some commerce trade there along with it, and maybe we can even possibly put some food trucks down there or something like that there, you know, make an event. But we'll see how it pans out, and then we're going to, that way we'll have people that are registered to put off the fireworks, do the fireworks, and hopefully that'll solve some of the problems. I feel sure it will solve the problem at River Park.
Yes.
So we'll see what we can come up with between now and next year. Hopefully between now and the end of this year.
Well, yeah,
Fresh in all our minds.
Well, and we have to make sure we have it in the budget, so.
Yeah, well, and we need to get time for anybody to do any fundraising and organizing, whatever have you, to do that. You know. And I was going to talk about yard sales, but I'm going to let Todd kick that off. Since you were talking about that, right? That's basically what the paper's about. It may not be all inclusive, but that's part of it.
That'll be a bullet point.
Yeah.
All right.
So with that, I don't have anything else.
All right, thank you. First item 8A, follow-up discussion on chapter 186, the curbs and sidewalks. I'm embarrassed to admit, but I almost forget where we left off with this. I thought we were almost buttoned up, but I guess we were not. Eric?
So, our current ordinance policy, whatever,
I hate to say this, it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic to enforce. It's unrealistic that some properties have sidewalks, other properties don't.
Yeah, if you're gonna come into the meeting, court hours, you know, you gotta put your phone on silent.
He's on duty.
Oh, okay. Okay, you get a pass then, buddy.
So, I have an issue with that. Either we go across the board and force everybody that doesn't have sidewalks to have sidewalks, or,
What we do, if they currently don't have a sidewalk, it's in the zoning thing that upon change of ownership, they have to get the sidewalk.
okay. It's also, I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm saying it's unrealistic. The second, and also the enforcement of curbs. I mean, no more street trees, but they do no more sidewalks. The second part of this was when we had the discussion of how far out is the borough responsible for it. And really, I paid for my sidewalk. I think Todd paid for his sidewalk. I'm sure some people paid for his sidewalk.
I pay for mine,
Exactly.
because I have brick, so I'm putting these sidewalk on.
And yet we have businesses getting free sidewalks due to location. And I always struggle with that. When I say businesses, I'm talking about rental units. Rental units is a big business in Columbia. The fact that they are rental units, a lot of times they're considered low income, so they get the grants. And I don't think it's fair to give business owners, free sidewalks that are operating their property while we're being forced to tax to pay for both their property and fix our own. So in my mind anyway, I came up with a simple solution. I'm not saying simple, financially, but to me it makes sense. I think for the borough's road construction, the curbs are necessary.
I agree.
And I think 4 feet, which is the ADA compliance, right? 4 feet off the curb, the borough is responsible for. And we have uniform sidewalks throughout the borough. Then if some people have brick roads, like across at 9th and Chestnut, they have a brick sidewalk all over. Well, not anymore, but, you know, if they want to keep that, I understand you want the old brick for nostalgia or whatever else. But if it's a 4-foot sidewalk, then the owner is responsible for everything beyond that. But that way, you put everything on your landfill, in my opinion. So the people uptown have bigger sidewalks, the 6-foot, 8-foot, 10-foot sidewalks. The borough covers 4 foot of it, the others cover the other 6, or whatever it is. But,
It's a question though.
go ahead.
So how, so does that mean there's no beauty strip and that 4 feet starts immediately at the curb? I guess that's what I was trying to figure out in my head.
Part of that can be an agreement between the borough, and part of it can be written on how to write it up. But, there are sections of town that do have these beauty strips.
Well, right, and that's what I'm saying.
And if we're okay with that, we still have to fall within, we still have to meet that 4-foot sidewalk. Yeah, for compliance. So therefore, if they have a 2-foot beauty strip, then we'll add that 2 foot, we'll put it in a 4-foot sidewalk. But, I think Sharon, you were brought up about uniformity. So that when you go through town, sidewalks are the same. They're both the same curb height. We want to go to roads still. Curb heights are the same, the sidewalks are the same, and all the corners will be ADA compliant, you know, that'd be part of the project going through. I just think we want to become a walking, riding municipality.
I like the idea, Eric, because I hadn't thought about anything like that. That sounds like it could be a solution.
I mean, where are we getting grants to do these sidewalks at? Down into the neighborhoods that are mostly growing against.
Derek, is it up to the owner or not for the beauty strip? Do you just put it in the whole block? Does somebody make a blanket decision for that, or?
You have, in your current curb and sidewalk ordinance, you have a minimum width. And it's based on the street right of way. If you look at, I think it's in the, if you look at section 186-37.
Yeah.
So the minimum width of the sidewalk depends upon the width of the street. So you can go wider than that, but that would be your minimum. And I think we've deviated from this a little bit, especially in the bigger streets where, you know, an 8-foot sidewalk is required in a 66-foot right of way, and that's pretty big, that's 462. But generally, most of the borough streets are around a 40-foot width, so your minimum is 4 feet.
So even the narrow ones that are 4 feet
They have to
can
be
have a
4
beauty
feet.
strip?
What's that?
They can have a beauty strip
They
even with
can
the
if they have enough room between the back of the curb and the front face of the house.
Okay.
But in many cases, like for instance, the project we're gonna do this year on 2nd Street, you have about 4 feet exactly, it might be 4.5 feet from the back of the curb to the front face of a lot of those porches.
So you're not doing beauty strips?
No room, yeah.
So now, going on that, and go with what Eric said. So, say you have 4.5 feet, and we're only paying for 4 feet.
They don't need to have,
So you're gonna make the homeowner pay for 6 inches.
if they choose it, they don't have to put more additional sidewalk in. ADA says 4 feet, right?
Yeah, but you don't want a 6-inch beauty strip. That would be the only.
No, I'm saying on the opposite side of the sidewalk.
Back towards the house,
Yeah,
then you're gonna have leakage.
Yeah.
but that's the owner's responsibility though. We can't take responsibility for everything.
But it goes under the sidewalk and the sidewalk up and everything, so it's damaging. It's gonna I mean, if you don't have good seal
Okay,
on either side.
so let me put it this way. Right now, the owner is responsible for 100% of the sidewalk,
Mhm.
okay? What I'm saying is, they're all responsible for the percentage that doesn't meet that 4 feet. So it is a savings to them, no matter if you want it or not. But, and I think by doing that, we end up controlling 4 feet of each side of the road, the curves, and the road. And I think that gives us a better combination as far as the road crews go. And it also makes everything standard throughout.
I agree, I do like that. I worry about the cost though. I mean, I look at how much we can, I mean, because we leverage liquid fuels for our street painting and everything. And we save money by our crews being able to do that. You can't use liquid fuels for sidewalks. You can't use right? You can't use liquid fuels for sidewalks or ADA ramps or any of that.
You can use it for ADA.
You can use it for ADA.
Curb and ADA ramp, you can
Well,
use it.
but there's another factor in there. Derek, not to put you on the spot, but what, off the top of your head, what percentage of Columbia Borough is in the CDBG tract?
About 3/4.
Yeah.
3/4. So 3/4 of the borough, going with what Eric's saying, 3/4 of the borough will fall under what we do with CDBG, because they want complete streets. Okay? So the cost to you, the borough, you being the borough, is only going to be in that 25% of the sidewalks that aren't covered under community development block grants, provided we get community development block grants. So the cost may not be as great as what we possibly may anticipate.
But, here's the question. Because right now, let's just say, I think we've been doing 5 to 6 pavings, streets a year. I think we said last year, we're at the point, and the whole reason this is coming up, is because we've hit the point where we've paved everything that has curbs and sidewalks that are relatively decent. And now we're down to the ones that really need some substantial reconstruction and so forth. At that point, if we're gonna say we're starting the new curb, sidewalk and everything, rather than being able to leverage and do 5 to 6 streets a year, we're looking at maybe doing 1.
Well, you only want to do this when you do a complete street rebuild.
Right.
And you're not going to do 5 or 6 complete street rebuilds a year. Not by the borough.
No, but I mean, if we're to a point where we don't have any more.
Well, truthfully, I think Columbia Borough has its streets in pretty darn good shape.
Oh, yeah, I do
Where
too.
1 a year probably isn't, I'm talking about complete rebuilds, probably isn't too far out of hand.
We honestly, Mayor, we have very few of those.
That's
And again, but this is, maybe this is, I don't know if this is terminology that we need to be clear on, is what is a rebuild and what isn't a rebuild. You know, most of your streets, we build them and we overlay them. And that's because most of your streets have a very good ballast base. Honestly, when we take that top course off, we're almost always in stone. There's about that much asphalt on most of these streets, and it's because you have these huge gooey rocks that your streets are built out of. They're very strong. Most of the cracking that you see on your streets is just because your top coat is worn out, not because your base is failing. So I'm going to say 80% of the streets that we've paved over the last 10 years have been mills and overlays. We rebuilt the 700 and 800 block of Walnut Street. We rebuilt the 200 block of Poplar Street. Those are the only streets I'm remembering. Bethel was rebuilt, half of it. We rebuilt half of Bethel, but that was only to make the sidewalk work.
Right.
Because of the street cross section being so bad.
With that said, Derek, and with Eric's thoughts, curbs will come into play and sidewalks. So the street may be in pretty decent shape for an overlay, but the curb and the sidewalk may be terrible, that needs to be done.
Sure.
So so basically, you're probably going to do an overlay on the street, but you're going to do complete curb and sidewalk, or
yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to get to in terminology. Is in many cases we're not doing a full rebuild. We're doing a mill and overlay where we're taking 2 to 4 feet out on the gutter line and getting you a brand new curb and sidewalk. Frankly, those are the really tough projects because we're kind of held to what that street, what the center line street grade is. We can only change that so much. When we can gut it out and rebuild it, we can make everything nice and level and uniform. But otherwise, we're
900 block. Now we did straighten that one out. The homeowner actually did, but 900 block of Locust and Walnut, where the curbs are rolling out. The streets aren't in bad shape, but there we would overlay, but put new curb and sidewalk in because we'd straighten that mess out. And that's what I'm getting at. That's where your costs are at.
I mean, the Wall Street project, that was CB.
No.
We paid for that. And the Chester Street project, what's all clear now? Are you supposed to be our block Chester Street this year?
it's not moving forward because this decision hasn't been made.
Exactly. So, that's why I want to get this decision made.
Well,
I mean, you know where I stand, but.
I worry about if
we put this in place, I think it has to be written to where it's understood when the borough will pay and when we will not. Because what I can see happening is people that currently have awful sidewalks calling and saying, hey, I got a problem with my sidewalk and now you're paying for them, so are you gonna fix my sidewalk? And I don't want that to happen. I mean, you have to be very clear.
You tie it to the street work.
Right.
It's tied to the street.
So it has to be written in a way that we're not gonna have people calling expecting us to do work on an existing sidewalk when we're not working on the
Now,
street.
this is partially be fair to the 25% off the pay, and partially more so to build a strong foundation between edge of sidewalk, gutter, road, and uniformity throughout the whole borough.
So, I mean, can we have it specified in the ordinance change that this is only for when the road work is being done? I don't know.
Oh, whatever you
I
like.
guess this is where, probably should have been a question for
That's
Evan.
okay.
That's all right.
No,
I'll text him.
I'll answer for Evan, yes. I mean, I mean, basically, the ordinance that you have is largely a regurgitation of the Borough Code.
Right.
Okay? The Borough Code of the state of Pennsylvania says curb and sidewalk are the responsibility of the property.
Correct.
Most municipalities, as you have a curb and sidewalk maintenance section, where if the curb or sidewalk falls into disrepair, and this was some of the criteria we talked about a year ago. Remember, I wrote that memo that talked about cracking and heaving, and you know, you have, this is, I think, where we stalled, is this is a two-sided sword, is you have new projects, which I absolutely, you know, admire and advocate for a complete street project. Now, again, if the curb and sidewalk are in pretty decent shape, maybe you don't have to completely reinvent the wheel, because I definitely don't want to hold Jacob from all the good stuff he's been doing in the borough paving streets.
Right.
We have to get the ADA ramps up to speed no matter what. Whenever we're doing the streets, they have to be brought to compliance. So that's kind of non-negotiable. We've been doing that. We've been paying for that as a borough. I think when you look at a street project, what I've seen some other municipalities do, this is where your 5-year projection comes in very handily. You need to be able to give people notice that you're looking at doing their streets. You give some opportunity for a design to be done. And what some other municipalities do, they do typically pay for the curb in a complete street. Again, if it's an isolated project, say somebody's building a brand new house, or somebody wants to take it upon themselves to replace their curb and sidewalk, generally they're doing it on their own dime. But if the borough decides we're going to pave this street, and you put, again, 462 was the last time this would have happened. Again, PennDOT was driving that bus, not the borough. But what would happen is we're going to pave this street, the notice goes out to the property owners, we're paving the street, you're responsible for the sidewalk, you tell them how many square feet of sidewalk they have, and that comes down to a design decision here by Borough Council, really, is do you want to see a beauty strip? Do you want it concrete the whole way? I can give you some engineering judgment on how much sidewalk needs to be there. We know it's a minimum 4 feet. I will say in many cases that the 4-foot ADA pathway is not up against the curb. Usually it's set back about 2 feet, because we call that first 2 feet a lot of times, it's not just a beauty strip, it's the utility zone. That first 2 feet is where you normally have all of your gas, your sewer vents, and your gas valves, and your water curb stops. It's also a place where we can change grades, because remember, even if we straighten the street, all your houses aren't straight. This door here, this door is here, that door is there, and we have to try to put a straight curb in and a straight sidewalk. That's why a lot of times, look right across the street here at the Hotel Locust Columbia, what they had to do to make all these doors match is you have a nice uniform 4-foot wide ADA path down the center of that sidewalk. The front part from the sidewalk to the curb is angled, and the piece from the back of the curb up to the building is angled. angle and it kind of undulates all the way down to keep the curb straight and the ADA path straight. So every street's a little different, I guess is what I'm trying to get to.
Oh, that sounds good, but then you just told us down here on Second Street, they have 4 feet.
They do. You
That
know,
4 feet's included.
yeah, that curb's gonna fly a little bit. That was not an easy street. So that's where the design constraints come in. That one is gonna be not fun to build. We had to be really tight with our curb grades on that. We had to be creative with our gutter grades, because frankly, it's all I had. Because when that street was put in, again, these houses aren't all at the same elevation.
Yeah.
And before, you just kind of set your curb and put your sidewalk in however you want. So there's a lot of old streets that kind of have the sidewalk very heavily slanted because it looks straight and that's what works, but that doesn't meet current requirements.
All right,
No, it's okay.
I'm jumping in before I forget. It sounded like you said that council could make the decision about a beauty strip on a street. Is that what you
So
were saying?
my viewpoint is that if the borough is doing the project, if you're doing the street, the council has some responsibility over the design.
Okay, 'cause
Okay?
sometimes these beauty strips end up looking pretty ugly. They are hard to maintain, and if that's on the homeowner to maintain that, I think they should have some say in whether they want it or not.
Yeah.
'Cause-
We've gone, again, I remember we put a beauty strip on 500-600 block of Walnut Street, and we did not on the 700-800. That was kind of council's response to, we don't really like this.
Okay.
Again, now in that case, council paid for the borough paid for the sidewalk, so there wasn't really any discussion, because the tree wells in.
Is there a benefit to a beauty strip?
Stormwater.
Yeah, it's less, again, when maintained. It's less impervious area, so you're reducing your stormwater runoff. It's generally less cost because you're reducing the amount of concrete you're putting down. So it really keeps the cost down with grass instead of concrete. That said, I recognize, especially in some of the neighborhoods with, that have tight row homes and they might not even have a butcher's alley in between them, or breezeways we call them. People really don't like carrying their lawnmower through their house, from the back door to their house to try to maintain it.
Or walk them halfway around the block to, do one pass.
Right, so that's an issue. So again, I think in the, some of the higher parts of town here, like up when you get into the 1200, 1100, 1300 block, where you have homes that are sitting there with front yards and, ample spacing between the properties, the beauty strip makes all the sense in the world. They're already cutting their front grass, and those are the properties that you see that have a curb and a 2-foot beauty strip, 3-foot beauty strip, and a 4-foot sidewalk, and that's it. So you kind of have two different design elements here in the borough. Your more residential kind of single-family detached home, and that might be a little different than the approach you want to take in your downtown, where everything's real tight. You get a lot of owners in a short amount of time, and some people will maintain them, some people won't, and that's been a challenge. I know.
So again, I mean, just so I'm clear, I'm in favor of curb and 4-foot the road responsible sidewalk. If there's a beauty strip in between there, we're still 4 feet responsible. That way we control the path, we control the grade, we control how it appears throughout the municipality.
So how does that, what are the implications for the tree wells? Does the borough take?
That's how we pay them.
So who would maintain, I mean, would the trees then fall under?
Julie, you're jumping in the agenda.
No, per our code, any tree in front of a home is the responsibility of the homeowner. The maintenance of the street tree is,
No, but the tree wells 3x5.
right.
So, but hold on a second, it doesn't matter because if there's a tree there, then the sidewalk still has to shift over 4 feet. It has to.
One of the things we want to talk about, I specifically want to talk about in the next part of the agenda, is when we revise this curb and sidewalk ordinance, or whether it's a street tree ordinance, that we need to give some consideration to some standard spacing. One of the issues we've had on previous projects, and I'm sure they'll tell you about this, is some people want a tree, some people don't want a tree, and I understand the burden of then having to own that tree. But what you have then sometimes is streets with very little to no trees on it, and then a cluster of like 2 or 3 of them. You want to make sure you can get some uniformity in your tree canopy. So council might want to consider more design guidelines on where trees should or shouldn't go, to make sure that when we do a street, we have enough trees and we don't run into, believe me, I've had a couple incidents where we're shaping up tree wells and the homeowner runs out and calls me a couple of words I won't say in this public meeting and tells us to concrete it in under no circumstances do I want a tree there. But neither did the neighbors on that side, neither did the neighbors on the other side, and then we're left with a pretty big gap in our tree canopy.
So then you fill it in when they say they don't want it.
That again, at the time, under whoever, and this was even before Mark, but at the time under, hey, what do you want me to do here? This is what we did. If you wanted a tree, we gave you a tree. If not, we didn't.
Are you saying, and I know we're jumping into the tree side,
Yeah.
but we'll come back to
But it was sort of,
Yeah, it does both,
it all work together.
It does, I think that.
Are you saying if you were able to design the streets today in Columbia, you would scatter trees throughout?
Yes.
You'd have a pattern? Is that what you're asking?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So if that's your recommendation, that's what you believe is right, then I think we should consider that as part of our process. I mean, I wouldn't want a tree in front of my house, but if that was the ordinance, or I was buying a house that was there, it's there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. This whole policy I know is walking the fine line between respecting property owners and their rights, but also looking for the betterment of the borough and the uniformity of the borough.
Right.
Again.
I'm all for looking more.
Well, and to be honest, if there's no beauty strip, the uniformity of tree wells also helps with stormwater runoff too, because it's less impervious, it gives you a break in the impervious surface, which is what a beauty strip is all about anyway.
I would advocate for in your densely populated streets, again, with mostly attached or semi-attached houses, I think if you want to do a beauty strip, I would recommend that beauty strip be brick.
Yeah.
Or just concrete the whole way from the base to the curb. I mean,
We did that on 9th Street, if I remember correctly. Homeowners had the option. We were putting a beauty strip in. You were either going to get grass or a brick. So if you didn't want to mow, or you didn't have the ability to mow, you got a brick.
Now, is that brick concrete it is?
It can be however you want.
Well, no.
I mean, however you design, however the borough would design. If I were designing it, it would be set down, the concrete would be set down 4 inches or 3 inches, whatever it is, and the brick set on the concrete.
That's exactly what we do. You put a stone base down with a mortar bed, and then you set the brick in.
And I put a couple of wheat balls in it, so it would help down in the arbor.
Makes sense.
Could you use like stamped concrete and dye the concrete so you don't have to worry about the bricks? Because ultimately dust does get in the cracks and you get the weeds. So I would recommend, like at the Burning Bridge, they have stamped concrete and they just put a dye in there. Now it might fade over years. I guess you could go out and paint it. But I think that eliminates weeds coming up from the cracks there.
That's a big problem.
Yeah, my concern with stamped is just that, Bill, is the long-term maintenance of it. Generally stamped concrete, you need to seal it because of anybody who has a stamped concrete, a lot of the big in residential areas now, everybody has a stamped concrete. That has a seal on top of it. You generally have to keep that seal on. It's almost like a floor wax that you put on top to keep that from cracking up. That stamp kind of lets water sit in it and expands and contracts. The bigger reason that I've seen people go away from the stamp, at this point, it isn't that much cost savings, and you'll never match it. If you ever have to cut it, you'll never be able to put it back to match what was on either side.
And it gets slippery.
Well, exactly, if you keep a sealer on it, it gets slippy when it gets wet. But I think, again, if you're gonna go with a beauty strip, I would just go with a brick. You can always pull the bricks up, put the bricks back down, because that's the area of your sidewalk where you're gonna get the most cuts. Again, that's where your utilities are laying. It's either right there or back at the house where your gas meter or your water meter comes in. Again, I'd advocate for either full-blown concrete, which I know is a little boring, but it does the job. If you really want to get fancy, then brick, but that's a significant cost then for that
Well,
strip.
Well, what we can say is, this is what we're paying for, and if the homeowners want something different,
Yeah.
that's on them.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, you can go outside some of the lower neighborhoods, and they do have decent sized sidewalks, anywhere from 8 to 10 feet. They're not making decisions one way or the other what they want to do, but it's on them. It's all about it.
As long as they meet the minimum width in your ordinance.
Well, we're gonna meet the minimum, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but for instance here, if the streets are 50, 60 feet wide, you need 7-foot sidewalks. That's what your current ordinance says.
Yeah, we have to look at that.
That's all I'm saying you did.
Does that make sense? That ordinance?
The idea being that some of those wider streets are gonna be, for instance, Locust Street. So you're gonna want wider than a 4-foot sidewalk on Locust Street, if possible.
Yes.
About the business owner, yes.
Exactly.
I believe that's what's on the street.
Right.
But just even for the sake of not just the business owners, but schools, and this was in one of my recent webinars, and they were talking about, your sidewalks, you need to have them as wide as to accommodate, everything. And I don't think we really want to say this is our minimum if, we want to encourage more things like the tables and stuff and the outdoor dining and all that. You can't accommodate that, and you can't accommodate benches for people to sit out if you're only going to give them 4 feet to do it.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Borough is responsible for.
You're talking financially. So I think to go back to what I was saying, and to address kind of goes from sort of your question, Sharon, is what I would say is you pick a street, we design it. What makes sense on this street? Do you want a beauty strip? Do you not? Do you extend this sidewalk back to this point? Do you cut it short and let an area in here? I think every street in here in this borough is unique. But when it comes to the cost, if under your policy proposal, Eric, it'd be very easy in each property to say you have 50 feet of frontage in front of your property. We've decided to go with a 7-foot wide sidewalk. That's this many square feet. We're going to pay for 4 of it. Here's the bill for 3 of it. That's how you have to do it.
That's perfectly fine with me though. Because we have a 4-foot common ADA compliant sidewalk, and yet the homeowner is not responsible for themselves, whereas before they were. That's a good deal. You know what I'm saying? Yep.
And then you set a program up like we did. You set a program up like we did in 462. You got 5 years to pay your portion, 0% interest.
Now, I would also say,
If we're giving them 5 years to notice that we're going to be doing this.
A lot of them didn't do it. A lot of them just paid it. Because they found out that the economy of scale, by doing a block at a time or 2 blocks at a time, we had several on 462 that said, no, I'll pay for my sidewalk. I don't want
Well,
sidewalk.
no, what I mean
What they
is,
found out was they couldn't beat the price.
well, no, what I mean is, we're not giving them that option to do it themselves, but we're giving them 5 years' notice.
Oh,
This
yeah.
is coming up, so they should be able to say, you know what I
If
mean?
they can save up and pay it off, that's great.
So
And the majority of them did.
under the current proposal, see, and we did talk about this last year, is some of the challenges, there are some streets, so for instance, Second Street that's 4.5 feet wide. Let's say hypothetically we were doing that street, and let's say hypothetically the property owners were responsible for all of that cost. That's a project that I could not endorse the property owners replacing their own sidewalk, because it's not gonna be at the right elevation until we get a new curb in. Now, again, if you're up in the 1300 block of some town, of some parts here, you have a curb, and then you have a uniform beauty strip, and a uniformly wide 4 or 5 foot wide sidewalk, that whenever those streets are done, if you want to replace the curb, you can. In many cases with that sidewalk, you can just replace a couple squares and make that what it needs to be. If you're applying a 4 foot wide credit, in many cases, that's going to be free. No cost, because you're going to keep the beauty strip in.
So, the only thing I don't necessarily agree with, what you said about beauty strip is, I'm okay with having different locations. I'm not okay with the council making a decision every time on what's going to get a beauty strip and what's not. I'd rather see documentation saying, this wide street requires this much sidewalk, and this, that much will allow beauty strip. But council constantly changes. Not only does council members change, but also opinions change from month to month. So I don't want the burden to be on us to make a decision every time we do a road project. Are we going to put a beauty strip or not? I think we set standards and say, okay, this street falls in that standard, this street doesn't. And just be black and white about it. Right?
I think the way you accomplish that is you currently have in your ordinance, and I didn't include it in your package, it is on in your E-code. Your current ordinance has a map in it that states, so, you know, back in, whenever this decision was originally made, I think it was 2005. 2005. So back in 2005, the last time this ordinance was updated, there was a map drawn to show what streets do not require curb or sidewalk, or what streets don't require a sidewalk. Maybe just curb, not a sidewalk. I think what you need to do is revisit this map, ensure that you still agree with the streets that have no curb or walk associated here, and you can easily go onto this map and maybe you can color code it and make all the decisions right now.
I agree.
This is designed, I mean, I could come up with a typical curb and sidewalk design to say street, curb, and then either sidewalk this wide, street, curb, 2 foot beauty strip, 3 foot beauty strip, 10 foot beauty, you know, whatever.
Right.
4 foot wide sidewalk. I mean, we could come up with some typical cross sections, and you could define every single block in the borough and say, if we were paving this street today, this is what we would do it, and then at least you have a roadmap.
Right.
And also the tree well, the plan for the tree well.
Right.
Now, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Thinking about, you know, out in beyond Manor, out in that area, because that's mostly where I don't see, well, in some of the more uptown. Why would we not want to say everywhere is a curb?
Everyone's a curb and a sidewalk. We want to walk the community.
Right. So, but thinking about like some of the streets now, what is the benefit of designating one as not needing the curb? Or is there a benefit?
You only have a couple here.
you know.
Fairview over by McGinnis,
Mhm.
the section of Florence Street, and basically the access road going up to the high school.
There's some curves on
Yeah.
Walnut.
Excuse me, I'm not the high school. Jake, what's their street term?
Oh, sure.
Cherokee Hill, thank you.
But,
Chestnut Street, there's no curbs up, once you get above.
yeah,
So-
third,
So under your current plan,
Right,
so currently there aren't, but under the current ordinance, it's required.
okay.
right.
Like, for instance, everything,
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Why would we want to leave any streets
Without curbs.
uncurbed? Okay.
well, okay, here's why.
I mean, that's,
Here's why, okay, this is why we would have to look at it. So thinking of the area of town, you know, kind of up from, let's say 10th Street, for instance, that area, there's a couple streets up there that don't have curbing.
right.
Problem is that if you add curbing, we have to add stormwater. We're gonna do add inlets and piping, because now you're ponding the water on the street, we're gonna have to do something with it. But after that, it just flows off.
That'll come back to street you build anyway.
It would, but it's significant, I'm talking, that's a significant cost that the borough would bear. So, again, I want to caution you on making kind of a carte blanche, every street has to have curb, because you might find out that some of them are gonna cost you a lot of money to put curb in for very little benefit.
Right, I'm thinking of North 13th Street, where there's already a stormwater issue.
So,
Or, well,
so
not as
you,
bad now, but.
so the reason is, we pick some streets that don't have sidewalks or curbs, just because it's inconvenient to the borough, maybe for.
Sure, Paul, Eric.
I'm
just trying, that would be my, okay, if you're gonna do this street, if you're asking for, my recommendation is to, should we put curbs on this street? Let's say, Street A. Should we put curbs on Street A? The thing I would evaluate is, what are your elevations, what's gonna happen with the water, and what would the ultimate cost of that street need to be to make it compliant with what you're looking at? And I will give you a
So what I'm
recommendation.
saying is, you're on one side of the street on the corner, my property's on the other side of the street. My side has sidewalks,
Okay.
yours doesn't. Now, the borough comes through and says, hey, you need new sidewalks.
I'm not worried about sidewalks, the question is curb.
No, but the curb's gonna be part of it.
Well, that's, the curb is my concern.
Hold on a second now.
Okay.
So now I gotta pay for mine, which could be $10,000. You, because we have a line, a color-coded line on your side of the street, you don't have to pay for anything. I don't see that being,
That's not what I'm saying.
No,
No,
you're talking about the curves.
no.
So listen, Eric, but in your scenario, so the curbs, under the proposal,
Right,
the curbs are the responsibility of the borough.
right,
4 foot of sidewalk are responsibility of the borough.
correct.
If you want to, I'm gonna pick a street that probably already has curb and sidewalk, but if you wanna pave the 1200 block of Chestnut Street,
That's nothing.
perfect,
That's
perfect, I picked right. So if you wanna put in curb and sidewalk in the 1200 block of Chestnut Street, it will cost the residents nothing. Because you're gonna pay for the curb and you're gonna pay for 4 foot of sidewalk, and that's all we're gonna put in there.
And then you go to the
Both, but you're gonna have to put storm sewer in likely to manage all the water. So I give you a cost estimate on what it would cost to do that on that block. And my concern is you as an elected official look at that and say, well, geez, I could do 6 other streets for the cost of that one, what's the benefit?
You know, 13th Street would be swamped.
Yeah,
No, you'd have to put stormwater drains in.
Right?
But then if you put the drainage in, then you're gonna have to go the whole way down 13th Street and tie in.
Oh, I know.
Because you can't, that's where you have to go on that street.
So we might be talking about a very small percentage of streets, but if the question is there any benefit to not including curb or sidewalk? My answer is financially, yes, there might be, because the cost of doing that could be extreme.
and I mean, the benefit yes, I realize we want walkable, we want the walkable community, but up in that area right now, the traffic is not that bad that people cannot walk in the street, because they all do.
Yeah, 'cause there's no sidewalk, and that's what we're encouraging.
Do it down here too, so.
Derek,
I mean,
what about the, I'm sorry.
no, right ahead.
What about the storm sewer part? What, can liquid fuels pay for that, or is that capital?
Yes.
Okay, so potentially we might have money to work with that. If we have to.
I mean, it's all, as
And again,
as you guys do at every meeting, it's a matter of how do you stretch your dollars the furthest for the best benefit of the borough.
but again, we're talking complete street rebuilds here. And you've just stated that very little streets need completely rebuilt.
Correct.
So what I'm saying is, if we put together a proposal, sure, we're not gonna vote on something today, and tomorrow everyone has to have new sidewalks.
Right.
But we put something together, so that when we go to that street, we have a plan in place. Not only do we have a plan, but we have a design out, so that every time we do another project, they fall around each other. That's just my thing.
I agree with the conformity idea, I agree with that. I'm not sold on the idea of paying, the borough paying for it. Where's that money come from? Where do we get money to pay for sidewalks? Right now we're getting CDBG grants right now for certain projects. I don't understand the entire process, how we apply for those, how they're awarded, and how we're responsible to spend them. Can we take monies and divide it up like that? We got a sidewalk, can we require a homeowner to pay for part of it, and the borough pay for another part, the grant pay for another part? Does that get all convoluted and messed up?
I was waiting until the end of this to throw the asterisk on there.
Well, all I'm saying, you can, the goal is to have uniform sidewalks.
Uniform sidewalks is okay, I'm talking about who pays for it. Right?
So again, I think from CDBG, that's a tough one. I don't believe there's anything in the grant that necessarily would disallow you from charging the residents. However, I don't think the sales pitch to get the grant is as strong. Because remember, the grant's paying for the sidewalk. That's what the grant's for, and we're getting the street paved and the curb.
But what I'm saying is, what's the difference if the grant pays for a 4 foot down Second Street, 4 feet, road, 4 feet, or up on the 1300 block, it's paying for 4 feet, the road, 4 feet. There's no difference.
So let's say it's not a CDBG grant project, it's a borough project, it's uptown somewhere.
Right.
We're paying for 4 foot of sidewalk, both sides of the street on 8th Street. The 800 block.
Let's talk about
Because
the
that's
10
com-
block of Chestnut Street.
That's exactly where I'm going with this.
So where does the borough get the money to pave 2 sides of the street, 4 foot block, either side for a whole block? How much does that cost, and where do we get the money?
So the landlord on Second Street, who has 7 homes, who's responsible under our ordinance to maintain the sidewalks, just got free sidewalks. Yeah, they're coming here.
That's not our decision, that's a grant decision, that's
No,
not
it's
us.
not. It is our decision.
No, it's federal.
It's a federal fund, it's not us paying
You
for it.
gotta
They
do the
just
whole work, so you're not getting the money.
Exactly.
It's a federal program.
I understand that. What I'm saying is 4 feet is 4 feet everywhere you go.
Yeah, but the federal CDBG federal monies, you're gonna do that complete street. And it has to be within that census tract.
Right. Which is 75% public road.
And that's just the way it is, you
Right.
know? I mean, you don't like it, people, I live uptown, I don't like it, but that's the way it is. And the only way you're gonna change it is to get the feds to change how they do that. But that's not gonna happen, not in your lifetime.
So CDBG
Yeah.
projects are off the table for a split payment conversation, is that right?
If you want the money, you're gonna do the complete street.
Right.
Right.
Okay. And unfortunately, I mean, however you feel about it,
I've been to enough of those presentations.
if you're not in favor of rental property owners benefiting from the grant award, well, like I said, just can't do anything about it. So for me, that's one checkbox I don't have to worry about, right? The other one, that's one checkbox I don't have to worry about. So no matter how I would feel about somebody getting a free sidewalk or not, I can't do anything about it, so throw that conversation out the door. We don't need to talk about that one anymore. But where do we get the money to pay for 4-foot sidewalk is a real discussion. The money's gotta come from somewhere. You know,
Where did we get it for the 4 blocks of Walnut Street?
I don't know, where did we get it?
Well, you were on council then.
That was
Where did
a long
we
time.
get it?
Where did we get
got it from the bond. We
From the
were all
bond.
That was
into
the
it.
bond money.
Okay, so now we
Take the streets.
took it from the bond, and now we're still paying on the bond.
Right,
We do take another bond to do more sidewalks.
that's what I'm
That's
saying.
what municipalities do though. That's what they do, it's quality of the bond service.
No trouble paying what we have now.
And that's why the hope is that we wouldn't have one street every couple of years to do. No.
I'm not saying, well, we change the ordinance today, and tomorrow we put new sidewalks and everything everywhere.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. That's why we would hope that we would be building up our capital so that when we do need to do that complete street, we have the money in the capital fund to do it. Because that would be a capital expense, correct? Yes.
Now you see,
She's a fool.
I had the privilege of experiencing both sides of this argument, but flip-flopped. I own properties as a landlord in Lancaster City. 2 of my properties fell on streets that were being redone this year. So I replaced sidewalks on both of those properties this year. I had to pay for it. But the city had a sidewalk program that I could buy in, economy of scale, super cheap. It was crazy not to take the deal. But I was responsible for that. Now, as a homeowner in Columbia, I was part of the Safe Walk to Schools program. Remember when that came through? Mm-hmm. I bought my house knowing I had to replace all that sidewalk. It's a half a block of sidewalk. It all needed replaced, and I knew that. And I was going to pick at it year after year after year. 2 years into my living there, Safe Walk to Schools came through. That was a state program, yes, or a federal program? Federal program.
It measured by the state, but it was federal money.
I didn't have to pay for my sidewalk, and that was a blessing. So I was a recipient of both of those scenarios. I had to pay for it as a renter, didn't get it for free. But I got it free, didn't have to pay for it as a homeowner because of 2 programs that forced me to change my sidewalks. So, you know, again, I think it comes down to money. Where does the money come from? Because at the end of the day, the taxpayer is going to have to foot the bill for somebody else's sidewalk.
Well, we're already paying though. You said the bond money did part of uptown here, so.
You can't undo what was done in the past, right? We can just move forward, and yeah.
But with going back to the safe school route thing, there are some sections out there that still don't have sidewalks and kids are walking home, because I see them. But besides that, I see an awful lot of people riding the scooters in the street, the mobility scooters. And I'm wondering why they're doing that. Is it because our sidewalks aren't uniform and aren't, you know, you get so far on one and you're stuck because there's no ramp or you just, you know, you can't
I
do
don't
it.
think you're authorized to scooter on the sidewalk.
No,
Yeah.
Like a wheelchair scooter.
Oh, wheelchair.
Okay.
Oh,
If you're a
okay.
scooter, you can.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I thought
But
you
they're
meant-
riding them in the street so often, and it's hazardous. It's dangerous, I think, for them. But I'm just curious why they're doing it. Is it because when they're traveling, and I've seen this when I walk, you know, some places you get so far and the sidewalk ends or there's no ramp, what are they to do? And I've seen it repeatedly that they're riding in the street, and it's kind of just a dangerous thing when we're hoping to be a walkable town. That's a concern.
You know, it's funny you say that, because when I came down to the car show, I parked at Holy Trinity. And as I was walking over, I walked along the Holy Trinity side of 4th Street. And I got to the alley. And that curb is huge. The drop off there is huge. And it's equally as big on the other side of the alley. And I'm thinking, man, if I was really mobility challenged, this would stink because I have to walk half a block down to the curb to where I could safely get off of that sidewalk. I would have to retrace my steps. And so, yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying. I mean, then that section, you think about where our elderly, I mean, not that any section needs to be more walkable than any other section, but you think about our elderly population at the high rises down there, they should be able to have a safe route, not just safe routes to school, but we should be able to have safe routes for our elderly as well. Safe route to the pharmacy. But yeah, you know, that's.
I just have a problem with the money because I wish we could do all sidewalks. Yeah, and have it all uniform, have a street tree plan where it all looks perfectly spaced out to beautify the street, put all the wires under the street, all utilities in the way, but there's a limit to money.
Right.
And who's paying for it? Like, you are paying for it no matter which way you look at it. And so, I think the ADA ramps on the corners, we definitely need to take care of and fix. Even, I don't know, there's some really bad corners that are exactly what we're talking about here. But how do you, I mean, if you look into the future, right now we're 75% in the CDBG funding qualified, 75% of Columbia, but into the future, it's not always going to be that.
That would be 25%.
And then are you going to be happy as a taxpayer to be putting in sidewalks for landlords for free?
So, we're talking about the money. There is no money right now to do this. I totally understand that. Okay? Like we said in the beginning, if we're to go this route, Jay's going to go from 5 streets to 1 street possibly. Okay? I totally understand it. But if you don't make changes now, the money's not going to be there in 5 years either. I'll tell you that right now. It's not going to be there in 10 years. So either you say, this is what we want, and we now have to start budgeting for it or planning for it, or you say, no, you know, I don't care what's happening. Either way, it doesn't matter. But you either make a decision and say, yeah, I want uniformity, I want beauty strips in certain areas, I want everything to flow nice and smooth, and we're going to be responsible for it, and therefore we're going to start budgeting for it, or bonding for it, that's what municipalities do, or we just say, it is what it is, we're going to stay the same way because we don't want to take that burden on. That's what you're here to vote for. Yeah.
I believe the bond issue and the major street projects that were done within that bond and other things set you in a position to where you could do what you're proposing. And you may only get 1 block a year, but you can afford it. I think you're in a position right now. You're not going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you do get to that point, and I don't think you're going to get to that point for a while, and if you do get to that point, you know, you just start chipping away at it. You just can't, there isn't enough money for you to say, okay, we're going to change this ordinance, this is what we want. So every street that's not that way in town, we're going to do next year.
No.
You can't do that.
No.
You know, so you do what you can do and you keep going, and maybe there may be a climate in 5 years, 10 years, or whatever, where you can say, okay, we're going to reissue a bond and knock the rest of them out, or the bond's going to be paid down far enough that we can do something. You know, so I think you're in a position to be able to do this, maybe on a small scale, but you can move forward. You're going forward, you're not going back, and you're not stagnant. And I like to see the community moving forward, whether it's a block at a time, 2 blocks a year, whatever you can afford, you're moving forward. You're not stagnant and you're not going backwards.
The other thing that I would like to see happen with this is we're at the point where we're talking about what happens with complete streets, but I would also like to see us doing something to make sure that what we do have is enforceable and it is enforced. For those blocks where, you know, you've got the heaving and you've got this and that and everything else, because even if we're not at a point where we're doing the complete street, you know, the complete street, we still want people to maintain their sidewalks and their curbs if they need done, not wait for us to do it, because that just makes, you know.
Yeah, there's 2 parts of the ordinance. One is when you're doing street rebuild,
Right.
and then your maintenance to your curbs and sidewalks.
Right.
That you're responsible for.
Right. Yes.
I have 2 comments. I'll go back to one thing. Derek brought up the map that showed with the red and blue lines on it. And I think this would be a time to go back and look at that. And as Derek said, see which streets, in doing that you feel should have the beauty strip, should, you know, meet certain standards when they're done. The other thing is, at the beginning, Eric mentioned about the sale of property and the need to have curb and sidewalk. And I had thought when that was written that applied if you purchased a property that did not have curb and sidewalk and the adjoining properties did,
Right.
that you would be required. It's not a case where if you didn't have curb and sidewalk and bought a property that you would automatically have to put in. There were some parameters there,
Yeah.
you know, that it had to be for that continuity. If you were between 2 houses that already had it, that you would have to install. Like if you were at the end of a row and maybe the one next to you had it, you weren't required to put it in to continue it. But if you were between 2 properties,
I understand what you're saying, I don't agree with what you're saying. I mean, I
that
agree-
was how.
That's the ordinance.
I agree, I mean, I understand the ordinance, I'm saying I don't agree with it.
No, but I'm just saying, you know, you brought that up,
Right.
and that's,
You know, if it's up to me, I'd say, Derek,
yeah,
draw this up like it's a new development. Design your sidewalks the way you want to design the way you want your trees, and that's our plan going forward. You
but
know?
Eric, look out on Manor Street. You got curb and sidewalk going out there the whole way, until you get to that block between 9th and 10th Street that didn't have curb and sidewalk.
Right.
There's one property out there that didn't have curb and sidewalk.
So, we didn't hear from.
Well, right, well, one thing that I would like to hear from, I would like to hear from Borough, because does the comp
No, it has sidewalks.
the comp plan,
Yeah.
does it talk about a walkable community?
Yes.
Talk about, what does the comp plan, because we're paying a lot of money for that, we wanna make sure that we're, whatever we decide here.
Your comp plan's gonna include everything we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, the walkable community, it does include being able to move around where you want to go, whether you are in a wheelchair or
Right.
elderly or whatever, to be able to move around. And it also includes that, that everything that you would need would be within a 15-minute walk.
Okay.
You know? And like, Marion, would you add to
No, I
that?
think you covered it.
But it doesn't give any more specifics as to,
No.
curbs everywhere, sidewalks everywhere, none of that stuff.
But the thing is, that would be in that comp plan, and that would be your basis for saying, look, this is in the comp plan, now we have to enact.
Well, right, and that's kind of where I'm going, is I want everything to tie together, I don't wanna say things and then not have it. So, oh, are you moving up in my neighborhood, because my neighbor's selling her house?
I'm worried about this, that runoff, what you guys were talking, that stormwater runoff on North 13, it's up in that area. So I'm thinking maybe I better rethink this. But, yeah.
So what's our next steps?
I think,
So once we have a general consensus, then Derek's gonna write a proposed ordinance or continue working on the proposed ordinance, correct?
right, I think that's what it is. That's what we want. They're gonna start writing stuff up. Once you guys come up for that, then we look at the map and say, this up there, those are the map here, here, and here. But,
So what is our consensus, that the borough is paying for curb and 4 feet of sidewalk, or the borough is paying for just curb?
I just had one question to be clear. The CDBG grant, if we did this ordinance the way we're moving right now, could we still get CDBG grants for specific neighborhoods that are eligible in that year
Yeah.
without any issue?
Your current ordinance has a section in there about financing and basically the borough offering programs. I would keep that in there because, look, we have one going on right now, 100, 200 block Walnut Street. I think in general, and this is really, let's go back to the beginning, is with the exception of the streets that we discussed that were bond streets. I mean, that was a 1 year thing, like 4 or 5 blocks there that were that bond. Okay.
Oh, and that was sorely needed, that was one well spent. Walnut Street's horrible.
Yeah, I think the bond paid for the 500 to the 800 blocks of Walnut, and it also paid for Bethel. Okay. To my recollection, and this is going back to, I mean, Jake, we went back to basically 462, which was around 2005, which I think is why the ordinance was revised at that time. It just lines up a little too easily for me. With the exception of the bond projects, I don't know of another project that the borough has done where you have replaced curb and sidewalk without a grant. It was either a safe route to school or a CDBG. That's smart growth funds that we have for the 100, 200 block of Walnut Street. So, without being very clear in your ordinance, the previous policy has been, if we're doing a street with a grant, we're going to pay for the curb and sidewalk at no cost to the property.
And this doesn't affect Walnut Street project.
So that's what I'm saying. I think if you move forward, as the mayor said, if you start charging people for sidewalk on CDBG routes, or hey, we're going to apply for a CDBG grant, but the residents are going to pay our match here instead of us paying it ourselves, you're not going to get the grant. You're not going to get the money. So what I would advocate for is, again, right now with your CDBG money, is you're getting grant money to pay for the curb, sidewalk, and ADA ramps, and maybe a little bit of the paving. And then you're basically paying for the paving as you're going to pay for it anyway. But you're beautifying the whole block. That's the benefit of the CDBG, even though I understand your point. Your point's well taken with the landlords and whatnot who's benefiting. But the viewpoint of the CDBG grant is that the borough is benefiting from it. And it's, if you're going to pave the street anyway, and you can get the grant for it, then you get a complete street. It's the same thing we're advocating for down on 102 block Walnut Street. That's going to be smart growth funding. So again, ultimately, the grant is paying for the beautification of the street, for the mobility of the street. No grant wants to pay for asphalt. That's not fun. They want the curb, the sidewalk, the street trees, the stormwater, the bike lanes. That's what they're paying for, and then you might be paving the street on top of it. where I think it has dovetailed nicely for this borough is on the streets that Jake has paved. That's the flip side of the policy, is if there's no grant, you're getting a paved street, and we're doing the ramps because we're federally required to do so. That's your current policy.
That's good policy.
So that's where we're changing or proposing. I think that's the biggest proposal to change is I would recommend you keep the current policy in regards to if you can get a grant for a street that pays for the curb and sidewalk, why not? But if your goal is when you pave the street, whether we're talking rebuild or mill and overlay, I don't know if we can really distinguish. I don't personally do that in other municipalities we work in. The street's being paved, whether that's a rebuild or an overlay, is the time when you want to look at your curbs and sidewalks. That would be the time to do it. Either you're going to want to do it, which means money and policy and design standards and dictation, or you keep rolling like you have been rolling and get your ramps done. Jake does a nice job on the street, and they get 5 of them done instead of 1. That's.
So can I ask a question? Did you have a question?
I do. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Eric's plan, could that fall under the section in here that says the borough can offer incentive programs? Could this be fine-tuned into that somehow?
That's exactly, so basically the ordinance leaves it open that you might not have to commit.
We could just decide at the time maybe to.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the bind that might put you as council or whoever your future council is Eric brought up the point, you're picking project by project, which ones you're gonna pay for, which ones aren't you gonna pay for. I think that's what's in there is to leave it open that if there's a pot of money that becomes available for programs. I have done some research on a program that the Lancaster County Housing Redevelopment Authority has. It's less for complete streets and more so for those spot repairs where there's an incentive program that they're running that they can cover like 50% of the cost if the property owner agrees that they're going to bring their sidewalk up into ADA compliance. I think you have to use a contractor. Let's see Lancaster has it, so you might know about it.
It's exactly that, yeah.
So you have to pick from a short list of pre-approved contractors, and you go through that program, and it's basically a 50% discount.
I would rather see something like that, where a homeowner could get a cost advantage incentive by using a program like that, and versus just us outright paying for a sidewalk, one-offs here and there every day. I'm sorry, I'm just thinking about that.
I see that as a way that we can sustainably say into the future, we can promote uniformity by essentially subsidizing our plan. And the plan to make the street uniform and the sidewalk. By providing a way for that to be done by one contractor by means of economy of scale.
Can we do that? Can we contract?
The plan that we did 462 on is what you're talking about. And it worked out very well. And what we did is we did it, the design work was done. There were drawings across all these tables that showed each block. We invited people in on Saturdays to view it. Here's your house, here's your block, here's your house, here's the width of your sidewalk. This is what you're going to be responsible for. It's going to be approximately this much money per square foot, so this is what you're responsible for. You can pay for it now or get into the program that was set up. It was a 5-year program, no interest. You can do either or. And then they made the decision, of what they wanted. We had, for example, curb cuts. You could pick a 6 or an 8 inch curb cut for the depth. If you had heavy machinery or trucks going in there, you wanted an 8-inch curb cut in there, your ramp. If it was just for your automobile, 6-inch did fine. So we brought everybody in, showed them what was going to happen, got their consensus of opinion. They knew what was going to happen, and the program was put in. We did that in a year, because PennDOT said we're going to pave it this year, and that was all done in 1 year. There's no reason this can't be done 2-3 years in advance. This is where we're going to do your street. This is what's going to be. And as someone said, well, if I know I'm going to have 3 or 5 years or whatever, then my street's going to be done. I'll just save the money and pay for it. But that's a simple program, and that everybody got to buy in. The borough can move forward and do as many streets as they're able to do because the homeowner is going to pay. And it's going to be, like you said, you were benefit of it, Todd. Such a reduced rate that it's one of the deals you can't pass on.
We keep talking about project-based sidewalk replacements. What about the guy who gets a code violation because he has crumbling sidewalks out front and just needs 2 out of 5 pads done?
Well,
How do we calculate who borough's going to help pay for that? Does that person qualify?
no, borough is only gonna pay in the event that we're doing the complete street. And
That's unfair.
that's
If
where
we're
I wanna
talking about
make it.
fairness, that seems
That's my
unfair.
other argument
That
is
seems
how
unfair.
do you enforce that?
Well,
Like, if, okay, the street's gonna be done in 5 years, but that's a trip hazard. So we're gonna make you fix it now, and then we'll come through and redo it
How do we do it right now?
in 5 years. Well, we just aren't enforcing it.
Oh, no.
No, what we did is
Have you been walking lately?
No, that's my point.
No, but Pete,
We have these ordinances we're not even following.
Right.
Let's straighten it out, let's make it the way it's supposed to be. And again, it's not gonna happen tomorrow.
right.
But if you put a policy in place, you can plan on that policy, you can work with that policy.
but that happened, Pete. And it was like, sorry, Charlie, you're going to replace that. You're going to replace these standards. And when we do it, all the rest of your sidewalk is going to get done under this plan, but we're going to leave that one sit. And we did partial sidewalks in some of the projects, 9th Street and some of the others. We did partial sidewalks for that reason. You got to maintain your sidewalk.
Right.
Or you don't get
Some of
sued.
the issue is
That's
that
fine.
if we do a street project where it's completely redone from the ground up, that sidewalk line or that curb line is gonna be different potentially. And so if someone just did theirs, it's not gonna match up, even if it is in good condition.
Yeah, so
Then when we go out, we're done.
the 200 block of Second Street that we're gonna be doing in a couple of months here, every piece of that has to come out, because there's no way that we can put a new curb in and save any of the sidewalk. So there's a situation where that's all gotta come out. 800 block of Chestnut Street, you could put in a new curb and maintain 90% of the sidewalk that's out there. You might just need to replace a couple squares here and there that might be huge repair. Now, maybe more than that, I haven't assessed the condition, but I'm talking uniformity wise. If you got one square that's heaved and these couple are okay, that might just be a square. Trying to think of some streets that we just did, over on 8th Street, 8th coming off of Locust on the eastern side. There was spot replacements there, because you have beauty strip. If you have beauty strip, you can do spot replacements. If not, you're kind of tied. For 100, 200 block of Walnut Street, now this is more driven by a right-of-way issue, but what we're going to do there is we're not looking to replace any of the sidewalk, basically those first blocks that are from the front face of the house out to the current. That's all going to stay. It's mainly driven by the fact that we have right-of-way issues, that the street isn't very uniform. We would have to require small slivers of right-of-way that would be enormously expensive through the PennDOT process. But it provides you a model moving forward where we could theoretically replace a curb and the first section of sidewalk and your ADA path that leave what's in there between the back of the ADA path and the house, if it's in good condition. So that's, and again, I'm not going to be helping things right now, but I can tell you as your engineer that it's challenging for me sometimes if we're gonna write a carte blanche policy, because I can drive you around the 12 streets I've done for the borough, and they are all different. And not all the differences are because of policy. It's because we've always tried to do what we felt the street needed to bring it up to conformity, but most efficiently spend the grant and or the borough's dollars on it. So it's tough.
Now, there are one question one thing I would like to see when you're reworking some of this is in section 18635B, which is where it deals with maintenance of existing sidewalks and curbs, and also section 18641, which is maintenance of sidewalks and curb repairs. If we could actually get pretty granular in there to give the examples of when it needs replaced and not just at the discretion of, because I believe if we can give the specifics in there, we can make this more enforceable. So the codes can say, you know.
If you, Heather, I think if you look back at the memo that I wrote last year, which I could have included in this packet for you.
Yeah, I know we had seen some of that, but I want that included.
I define that all, a horizontal gap of 1 inch or more, vertical difference by a 1/4 inch or more. I have all of that.
Yes, we need that in this thing, because that will help us be more, will make it more enforceable.
Yep.
And then maybe over the next 2 years, we make it a goal for codes to, to take stock of all these things and notify homeowners that, hey, per the ordinance, your sidewalk needs repairs, blah, 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 blah. And if they're within that 5 years that we're gonna be doing a complete street, we give that one a pass because they're in their 5 years. I don't know.
How do you give anybody a pass?
I don't think you should either. Here's my final thoughts on this. I mean, I've heard enough. This is what I would vote yes on, understanding that projects that are funded by grants and other money sources are off the table. That's a boon for whoever happens to live there. That's not affected by this conversation. And trying to be fair across the board to all property owners, whether you're a rental owner, or you own a home and you reside there, and being in congruent, if that's the right word, with Borough Code, which states that the sidewalk is the responsibility of the homeowner, period, right? That's what it states. And understanding what you're trying to do, you brought this up, Eric, this is your conversation or argument, is that you want to help people pay for sidewalks, right? And you want to do it fairly. What I see working across the board is this preferred contractor program that gets used, whether it's a project on the whole street, or we have a preferred contractor program that we have an agreement with or arrangement with somehow, that any homeowner at any time, whether they want to upgrade their sidewalks or because there's a code violation or some other instance to replace the entire sidewalk or a pad or two, can come in and get a reduced cost on their sidewalk replacement through the program. And does that come out of borough funds to help subsidize that? I don't know. Does that mean the contractor gives us a great deal because we've offered them, all the business in the borough if they should come to them? I think that's the fairest option. It works for all scenarios and it works for every homeowner in every situation, and the same discount applies across the board, whether you're doing one pad or a whole block full of sidewalks yourself.
That takes in a whole lot of the conversation that Shade Tree is faced with every month. It's My tree is lifting up this pad, 1 4x4 square. My tree is lifting up. I want you to take my tree out. I need to get my tree out of there. And can you pay to get my tree out of there? And can you help me with the cost of that sidewalk? This takes into account that, takes that into account. So it's not only we're going to do this whole street, but what these folks fight with every month is a preferred contractor. They can contact them, and a piece as big as this table needs to be taken out. Take it out, put it in, it falls under that program. They get that
10% discount.
and that solves a whole lot.
Doing a whole sidewalk.
That solves a whole lot of sidewalk problems. It solves a whole lot of shade tree problems. Just doing that. You're on to something right there. I'm sure these folks would agree.
No, we do. I mean, throughout this evening, as you've all been talking about solutions, like the thought that's been in the back of my mind is that it's important, but it doesn't address what we see at Shade Tree. At least half of our meetings have people that have lifting or just, we have a lot of legacy trees and very small wells. And that the residents see the solution as the tree caused this, get it out, when we're saying, well, if we can keep this healthy, mature tree, but cut out some of your sidewalk or lift that square or do the bricks over, that's a much smaller investment really than tree removal and new tree and all of that. But we don't have an effective way to deal with that other than to tell the people, well, it's your responsibility, and then.
And I think that arose from, you probably know this too, going back to the 80s, and Derek, correct me if I'm incorrect, but when we got CDB grants for sidewalk and curb replacement, the Lancaster County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, through the federal government, said you have to put street trees where you want to have new curbs and sidewalk. And this is going back to the mid-80s. I don't know if that's still a requirement, but people had to have a tree whether they wanted it or not. And then they sold the home and someone else, bought the home with a tree in front of the property. They say, well, this was planted by the Shade Tree Commission so many years ago, and I'm stuck with it. And as Leo mentioned, that's the plan that Todd just mentioned would remedy that, save your tree that was put in to David Dennis' approval at that time of the homeowner, and they want to have, trees add ambiance to a neighborhood, and I think that would be a good solution. But I just want to make sure going forward, any community development block grants, that if you put in a new curb and sidewalk, are there requirements that you have to have trees so many feet?
It's not a requirement of the CDBG grant. However, it can work in your favor when they're kind of awarding the points and scoring the project as whether you're going to get funded or not. Any type of tree canopy enhancement or stormwater improvement is nothing but positive points for your application. I can tell you it's also a consistent recommendation of the Lancaster County Planning Commission is every CDBG application that goes in is also reviewed by the Lancaster County Planning Commission, and they will issue a letter to basically say whether or not it meets the criteria or is consistent with Places 2040. And that's almost always the letter we get. Is the letter comes in and says your application is consistent with 2040 under this criteria. We recommend you add street trees when you're designing, because at this point we don't have design or anything, but it's always a recommendation of theirs to add street trees or stormwater improvements along with the design of the project. So I could very well see that maybe back then it might not have been an actual requirement of federal grant, but somebody at the borough at that time made a policy to say, look, we're going to put street trees in because this is going to get us this money, and this is a good idea.
But thinking about the blocks where we're getting the CDBG grants for, the majority of those don't have room for street trees.
Yeah, it's a bad one to talk about here because again, on 2nd Street, we don't have any trees proposed. I don't have any more.
Yeah.
We have that one tree that we're trying to save. Remember Julie and Amy on the corner there? We're gonna try to trim the roots and keep her alive.
Harry and Lawrence Street's a prime example.
Yep.
Right.
That was a 3x3 planning space. Now, Shade Tree Commission has expanded that to a 3x5 planting space. And then you had the Bradford pear. Everybody said that's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but that really contributed to the lifting of the sidewalk. So one solution might be to get planting concrete planters, yeah, thank you. And that would eliminate lifting the sidewalks, and you get a tree that's appropriate for that space. And if the tree does die, you just take the tree and its roots out and plant a new one in that spot. Or, I know we take up a parking spot, but, you know, have a bump in the curb, like you have for traffic calmers, maybe in the middle of the block. That would keep the roots at bay by having that too. So, just a mic.
And Mark, I think, just applied for monies through Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
I think they applied
They're
on our
applying,
behalf for
Yeah.
community outreach efforts.
but it would be a sizable, it's like a five-year program, I think,
I think so.
to help build up the urban canopy. And I think, I don't know, would monies maybe be able to be used towards sidewalks in that respect too, as they relate to tree issues, and that would tie into the projects. I'm not sure.
It's possible, yeah, it would depend on.
If we're chosen for the money, but yeah, I feel like the more trees we add, the more we would be considered for things like that.
Stormwater Partners has secured quite a bit of money from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
Yeah.
And I think you're right to it. I think you could tie that into street work, as long as you were talking about trees, replacement of trees, and repairing the sidewalk damaged by a tree, as long as the tree can come back in here. You can, I think that funding will fall in that realm, because it's all about capturing stormwater.
Not to mention the property value. I mean, we don't really look at that aspect of it. More allowance.
All right.
How about-
Everyone
Okay, yeah.
to ask, do you see other municipalities kind of doing what Todd was talking about with the economy of scale and getting a preferred contractor program?
So, in Lancaster County, yes, and I did, again, Lancaster City has the program. I've done some research and spoken with Manheim Borough. Manheim Borough is utilizing a program through the Lancaster County Housing Redevelopment Authority that actually utilizes some CDBG money. Again, and this wouldn't be a one-size-fits-all here in Columbia, but they're offering a program where if you meet certain income limits, and it's per property, so the property owner, whoever is applying for the funds, so I would assume, to address your concern, that if it's a rental property, I don't know if it actually goes by the people who live there or the homeowner. Because the homeowner, it might be the homeowner's income, not the resident's income. I'm thinking you've got to be a homeowner and meet a certain income limit, but they offer a 50% grant. So it's very similar to Lancaster City, only it's funded through CDBG funds. The borough, in this last year, the borough's been promoting the program. They kicked in an extra 25. So the borough paid, the Lancaster County will pay 50, we'll pay 25, you pay the other 25. Unfortunately, I don't know of anybody who's actually utilized the program yet.
But how do we get involved in something like that?
So I just kind of scratched the surface of this. I just found out about the program not too long ago, and
We did have a lady down on Warren Street that took advantage of placing some of her sidewalk with that.
with this program.
The first one you mentioned. It was funny, based on her income.
Through Lancaster County Housing, yeah. So I think the borough of Columbia doesn't necessarily have to adopt this as a program. I think each individual property owner can apply and get through this. It's just in Manheim, they adopted it and promoted it and said, we'll pay on top of that, which is something you could choose to do.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, but I don't know, I wanted to bring it up tonight, it's a possibility. I don't know 100% of the specifics enough to truly present that to you as an option tonight. I'd probably have Justin Evie or Sean or somebody from LCHRA talk to you about that.
I would like to hear that,
Yeah.
more about it, if you could arrange that.
Yeah, I'll talk to Justin.
Thank you.
Or I think Ezra might, talk about that too.
Possible.
Because at our last Boroughs Association dinner, he was there and was talking about some new programs.
So, again, I've seen those in Lancaster. I haven't seen a lot of those over in York County. York County, they don't have any programs like that that I'm aware of. And again, I rep Elm Borough. Elm Borough has had a very strong complete streets policy for a very long time. And generally, that's how we do projects over there. Is we're going to do the street, we're paying for the curb, we're paying for the ADA ramps. Property owners, here's how many square feet you owe us. And they have a 2-year interest-free program to pay that back. And if you don't pay it back in 2 years, or if you miss a payment, they put a lien on the property.
And that's for the sidewalk.
It's for the sidewalk. Correct, it's the sidewalk. But there haven't been many, I'm going to stop there.
All right, well, let's do a straw poll here to get there, some closer to the specifics for the thing. The first question is, are we adopting the complete streets policy? Straw poll on this one.
Yes.
Yes. What do you mean by complete street policy?
Like when we have to redo, the street, like repave the street and everything.
Or wall.
Wall.
Okay, yes.
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 Yeah, complete streets. Yeah, so we want the complete streets part, okay? Next straw poll here, where are we on what the borough will pay for? Street, or obviously the street, curb and sidewalk, or street and curb?
Curb to curb, but keep on the scale, put it on the.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, figuring out a way for the homeowner to pay would be the second part of the discussion, but what are we thinking the borough is responsible for? Street, curb, sidewalk, or street and curb?
Over years.
Street and curb.
I wanted to hear more about the program he just talked about before I read.
Well, I think you can do what you want to do, or what you're proposing. That's just,
The way
icing on the cake.
Right,
That's the way to
that's
pay
the
for it.
way for the homeowner to pay for it.
I think this program lends itself more towards that property owner who wants to repair or replace their individual
Okay.
concrete. I don't think this program would play well with a complete street.
No.
Because, again, very rarely would we want another contractor coming in on top of our contractor trying to lay curb and sidewalk.
But with that and your straw poll, I would urge you to look at, if you're going to do curb to curb, homeowner responsible for the sidewalk, that you also include individual pieces of sidewalk as Todd brought out. Because that's one of our biggest code enforcement issues. There was single paths, 4x4 pieces have to be changed.
Yeah, that goes in on the other part that we already.
Are you saying the borough's gonna finance the residents repairs?
They're gonna have a preferred, the borough, just like we do with snowplow, like we did with snowplow. You get a contractor that says, I'll handle all your concrete, your sidewalk for X amount per square foot, which is an economy of scale. Someone comes in and says, I have a 4-foot piece of sidewalk I gotta replace. You gave me an NOV. Okay, call this company, we gotta deal with them. They're gonna give you the rate and they'll replace that one section of concrete. Rather than them have to go out and seek someone to do the work. They're gonna get a better rate.
Here's what I want. In this, I want one of the real problems that we're facing in the future. So let's say 8th Street. Can we take that, can you evaluate that and lay out the cost
You mean Chestnut?
As Chestnut Street, yeah, 800 block of Chestnut. Lay out the cost, what it would cost for the borough to put 4 feet of sidewalk in there versus not. Because we're gonna have to make that decision anyways. Some of this feels like it's in a vacuum, and we don't really know the cost.
We can pull, the better thing to do here, I mean, obviously we can evaluate that moving forward. That's a decision that's gonna be at your feet here very soon, as to what you wanna do on that street. If we wanna look real numbers, I can pull the bid results from the last couple of street jobs.
Right.
I have a bid, I have a bid right now for, I can tell you right now exactly what, 200 block of Second Street is gonna cost.
Right.
I know how much a square foot of sidewalk costs on that one.
Yeah.
So you can see what portion is, if that's a hypothetical project, you can see what portion you're paying for versus what portion residents would. And I could, again, pull a couple other ones here.
Yeah, I think that's a good case study or an example, because there's tree issues on that block as well. There's 2 big oaks that the homeowners are very concerned about when it comes to redoing those curbs, and sidewalks, and streets on that block. They've asked me about it several times. I'm like,
So, Eric,
I'm all in.
you're all in, Burr's all. The question is, are we saying that the borough is curb to curb and homeowners to sidewalk, or boroughs are all in? Eric says the borough's all in, or
Homeowners sidewalk.
Borough code says homeowners are responsible for the sidewalk, curb to curb.
and yeah, I mean, we can do everything we can to make it attractive and help finance and things like that on a street by street basis.
And outside the street.
Right,
It's gotta be fair for all folks.
Right. But I also would like to see the ordinance updated to include the guidelines that are more specific so that it is more enforceable, so that we can send, we can give the notice of violation and know that we have completely spelled out what is required of the homeowners on their sidewalks. And we also want to include to make sure that it's specified that brick sidewalks have the same standards as the concrete sidewalks. I don't want people using bricks as an excuse to not be level and, everything else.
If they're updating, remove any reference to a council highway committee.
Yes.
There are quite a few references in there.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's a lot.
I have some quick numbers.
Okay.
That would be beneficial. So the cost, the bid price that the Second Street project was awarded at, $288,980. So let's just say 290 grand, round numbers, okay? The sidewalk cost on that project is about $74,000.
One side or both sides?
Both sides. That's the 4-inch thick concrete and the 6-inch thick concrete.
How wide are the sidewalks?
That goes removal.
4.5 feet. 4 to 4.5 feet.
That's removal.
What's that?
Is that removal and?
Yes. It's removal and replacement.
That's complete. $70,000.
$14 a square foot for 4-inch sidewalk and $16 a square foot for 6-inch reinforced.
See what?
I was able to put a sidewalk in for it.
Yeah. The curb.
The curb is a big expense.
The curb is $80 a linear foot. That cost is 70 grand. So it just kind of worked out on this one that your sidewalk's 70 grand, your curb's 70 grand. Adding them both together, it's 140. You have a grant for 200.
Well, Derek,
Yeah.
am I wrong? Technically, right now, the homeowner responsible for the curb.
Yes. Yes. Borough code, yes.
Right, so we're all in agreement that we're gonna change it from,
I've never heard any of you deviate that you're paying for the curb. That sounds like that's set.
I mean, the curb anchors the street, so,
Based on those figures, you're giving your homeowner a 50% rate. Just for, yeah.
all right, do we have enough to go further with the ordinance, Derek? Yes,
Take a crack at it.
take a crack at it? All right, is there anything else we want to talk about on street trees? I wasn't quite sure what that was on there for.
yeah.
We were given very little context about.
Yeah, I honestly, I saw the email and I was like, that was one thing I had asked Mark, I'm like, what's the street trees on there? He said, I don't know, Eric wanted it on there.
I did.
Yeah, that's what he told, that's what Mark told me. Mark said he wanted it on there.
Okay. So I had no idea. But since I saw it on the agenda, some things popped in my head, so I'm gonna ask some questions. Is there a tree native to the area that does not destroy sidewalks?
There are always going to be trade-offs. There will always be some type of trade-off. It's a natural organism that will not always do what it is
And those where the
supposed
roots
to
are
do.
gonna go.
But I understand that to a degree, but then, wasn't Lucky Street planted with trees that were close to?
They're less obtrusive. All trees have roots.
Right.
And it's also, like the tree is one of the factors, but the way that the size of the well will contribute, the soil that was used in the well, kind of like the way that water flows underground, the roots will kind of follow that, seeking the water. So, yeah, it's a very complex kind of like there's not a perfect tree for every situation. Because the specific situations are really different. Throughout, just even in the same block, that's.
But again, I'm going back to, Derek's going to redraw Columbia Borough. And he's going to put wells in certain streets in certain locations. What tree best suits that well? Is there any tree that best suits that well?
It depends if there's utilities, it depends on, I mean, the well size is 3 by 5, and it depends if a 3 by 5 could even fit in front of a property.
Well, if it doesn't fit, if it doesn't fit, it's not going to
Obviously.
But I mean, there's some other considerations you want to think about too, which is, I mean, if you have a town with all of the same kind of tree, and it's susceptible to something like lanternflies, like that's too much at risk.
We try to bury it.
Species diversity is good for protecting the canopy of the town as a whole.
Okay, that makes it all makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm by far a tree person. But I do appreciate, no, by far. Trees grow in the forest. Anyway, my point is, if we're going to call it a concept, should we have a few trees, 5, 10, I don't know.
I mean, I think you all saw a
Yes.
draft street tree list where,
Yeah, I mean, they have.
Small, medium, large.
and we do have, I think we identified 5 of those as, like, if you're not really, if you don't have a strong opinion about what you want, and you want something that's gonna cause as few problems as possible, like, look here. But
should we-
even after that, like, you'll want to, like, whether the street runs north-south or east-west is gonna affect what kind of trees do well in any, so
Sure.
there's options.
Should we, as a municipality, regulate that?
We do. It is. Yeah, we do. It is.
You need a permit to plant trees, or to take one down.
On the sidewalk?
Yes. Anything that overhangs a public right-of-way.
Okay.
Yeah, that all has to go to the street tree commission.
I think that's why a concrete container could solve some of those issues too.
You know, Bill, I was in Chambersburg,
Yeah, they do that.
and if you look up the streets in Chambersburg, and I never thought about that until I got there, look at this. One side of the street, they have trees and shrubs and all in planters. The other side of the street, they have trees.
Yeah.
The power line, the side of the street with the power lines on has the planters. The side of the street with no power lines has the trees. And that's why they don't get trees that look like this here with the center cut out.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are a couple of situations where we've, on 3rd Street here on Locust, where we've experimented with, okay, a street tree doesn't make sense, but if you install planters that approximate the amount of green cover that a tree would, we'll consider, you know, on a case-by-case basis, as mitigating not having a street tree. So we've got, I'd say we've got about 2 instances of that right now, but so far, it's been working out.
Worked out great.
But there's also, like, we don't have anything on paper in the ordinance regulating that, which I think is something we would want to get in place pretty quickly before it catches on more widely and people start kind of going outside of what we're comfortable with. But that's a little bit of an aside, but it is something that we're working with people on.
Play a little bit of devil's advocate, because I attend a lot of shooting. Should the borough take ownership of all the street trees in the borough, rather than push one homeowner, because the Shade Tree Commission regulates things.
We regulate sidewalks.
Yeah, you regulate the sidewalk, but we constantly hear, you put the trees in when you redid the street, now I gotta pay for it. Right? Okay, it's not my tree. We had trees over here, and a certain individual had the trees, said the trees were put in by the borough, had them removed and the sidewalks repaired at the borough's cost. You know, and then other people, you say, oh, it's your job, you gotta take it down, you gotta pay to take it down. I didn't put it in. You know, I didn't ask for a tree, I gotta pay to take it down, and then you want me to put another one in. And so I have the trouble in 20 years again, you know. Should the borough look at, most of the trees that are going in Columbia Borough, you're putting in. Homeowners not putting in, you're putting them in. So why not take control?
Well, I mean, I will say most of the ones we put in are at a property owner's request.
Yeah, but I'm saying, you're putting them in, you're paying for them, and putting them in, so why not take ownership of them?
You know, I was an advocate for that when I used to be on the Shade Tree Commission. And my thought process is that the borough hire a full-time arborist, and then they would start at one section, go around, and then by the time they get around to maintaining those trees, they probably have to start to maintain where they started, you know, maybe a year or 2 ago. But, you know, in the wintertime, there might not be much work, although there's pruning, that's a good time to prune. You know, they would fall under Jake's, under his authority, and he could assign them different jobs throughout the year when planting and trimming and maintaining trees. Like in the wintertime, he could be on the.
You already do actually.
So, but you would hire a full-time arborist, and that would be their responsibility to maintain the trees. If the limbs are too low, they would raise them, they would fertilize the trees, water newly planted trees, because that's a big issue too. If the tree doesn't get sufficient amounts of water during the first 2 years, that's very critical. So that was an idea, and I agree with Leo, that, you know, perhaps that the trees should be taken over by the borough to maintain maintenance. Just street trees. If it's in a park or if it's back off in someone's yard, then that's the homeowner's responsibility. Anything between the curb and the sidewalk where there's a tree, that's considered a street tree. Now, when planting a tree though, if you have a nice front yard, ultimately that canopy is going to go out over the street. So that serves the benefit there. But for maintenance, as Leo mentioned, you know, curb and sidewalk, between curb and sidewalk, that would be the maintenance and responsibility of the borough highway.
So what happens if a borough tree tears up the sidewalk?
You go in and you replace it.
So the borough's gonna replace the sidewalk?
That's
Well, they just
that's where I always talk about managing your urban forest. When those trees get up to that point, you gotta make a decision whether that tree comes out and put another tree in. It may be 20 years. When it starts causing trouble, you gotta get rid of it. That's, foresters do it all the time. When a tree gets to a certain caliber, they cut it down, make furniture out of it, and they plant other ones. they're managing their urban forest before it starts causing damage.
Yeah, but you can't necessarily go by that because you do want some mature trees in your.
You'll have that strata as you do this, because you're just not gonna take and wipe out all your trees at one time and put all seeds.
Well, right now, most of our mature trees have been wiped out, the street trees.
I'm so sorry.
The street trees, most of the mature, larger trees are pretty much gone. So we're just working with trees with smaller calipers at this point, the majority of them.
So you're putting them trees in, but there are trees that are 6-inch caliber and.
Yeah.
And therefore, so you're gonna have this strata.
Well, we've lost most, just like in the last 10 years, we've lost a significant amount of, you know.
Yeah, when we
pretty much
put rapid repairs, out, you start putting other trees in, look up at the Mount Bethel.
Right.
That's all changed.
Well, it's in effect now with the brick beauty strip. As the tree gets larger, you take the bricks out on the side.
Yeah.
So that leads to the question, what do we do with legacy trees that are in the way of a curb line and a sidewalk?
Right. I think you do what was done up at, up on Chestnut Street, both at Ron Sott's house and then up at, just recently, Maury Kaufman's house. There in the, what would that be, 1100 block.
Yeah.
Because of the big oak trees, they moved the sidewalk, they curved the sidewalk around. Whereas someone said earlier, you put a little bump out into the street, you might lose a half a parking space, but you saved that legacy tree.
Is that allowed to trump the ADA compliance? Because that sidewalk is not ADA compliant. It goes down to 36 inches max.
But you may have to maintain the floor.
You go down to 36 inches before 36 inches.
Okay.
There's an exception for obstructions like utility poles and signage, and you can go down to 3 feet for 3 feet.
Well, Leo, you were saying with Ron Socket, that's highly recommended by the National Arbor Day Foundation.
Yes. That's to preserve your, as good as legacy trees.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, the effects, the beauty, the shade, the removal of CO2 from the air. This turns a beautiful area with a tree. It was once a bland area. They also say studies indicate the crime is lower where you have trees growing.
That's an interesting concept about the borough taking ownership of the street trees.
I don't have hard feelings either way, I just wanted to throw it out the devil's advocate.
Now, one of our committee members brought it up, and other, like, larger, like, New York City, and they've got an enormous budget, and they have arborists, and, you know, they do take ownership for street trees. And larger cities do it, it's just a budget issue.
No.
Right, creating another position, or, you know.
No, we take ownership of the street trees. Thinking about particularly some that up in the 700 block of Locust Street that are badly in need of some pruning, that are right up against the residents' windows and stuff. If the borough owns trees and they cause damage to the house, are we liable for the home damage?
I understand what you're saying, but I think what you do is, you drive a stake in the sand, you say, from this day forward, we will buy the trees, we will maintain the trees that we bought. Those that are now in the ground, they're your baby. Now, if and when they ever come out, we put one in, then it'll be our baby.
I think that's the only way it would work, because at that point you can set the standard. We can purchase the equipment to take care of a tree that's 80 feet tall. But we could decide this is the level of equipment and expertise that we're willing to have, and that's at that size of tree, it can come down and we'll replace it.
Yeah, if you do an ordinance, you pass it, then everything currently in the ground is grandfathered. Everything forward falls under that.
It has to be a very simple, just like you were saying with the sidewalk, it has to be a simple across the board ordinance, or else if there's too much, we decide every time the tree comes out. It'll be there.
Well, once you do that, the Shade Tree Commission has it, controls it 100%.
Okay.
Now, before I would be ready to say that, we need budget numbers. Because, and we would need to know what we would need to have in place
So, I mean, you had those at one point.
before we make that determination. I see Jake over there, he's shooting daggers at me.
He might want to kill me. I mean,
Jake needs people. Yeah. Jake, you need people.
taking the trees out isn't so bad. Grinding the stumps, you buy a stump grinder.
But, yeah, before we go to there, I would want more information
Oh, I think you do.
on how
You gotta
to
do
do
it.
that work.
There would just
You
be
gotta-
a way to get people to buy in, I mean, from our perspective, to plant more trees and to green up Columbia more. But will it work financially? You know, I don't know. That's,
I'd definitely be interested in exploring it.
you know,
Well, remember when you got the gift, we talked about something very similar to this and said, okay, what we're gonna do is we're gonna budget, or we're gonna allot X amount of dollars a year. So we'll do that much work every year within the budget, and that's it. And then next year, based on grants or whatever, what you set your budget, and that's the tree work you do the next year. You work within your budget, just like anything else. Just like doing the streets, you work within your budget.
Right.
and we have the nursery now has 100 trees in it. And some of them will probably be ready to cut maybe next pull or dig next year. I'm thinking they're starting to shape up now. So, fingers crossed. But that's another source of, you know, adding greenery.
I think it's probably safe to say that 90% of the trees planted in Columbia Borough in the last several years, you guys paid for. You want to put them that way or another.
That's probably,
So, I mean, you're almost there.
It's just food to buy.
All right, is there anything else, I didn't realize like how it's getting, is there anything else pressing on the street trees? Eric, since you wanted that. All right, now we're gonna move on, we'll move on to the short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals.
Short-term rentals, so we have the ordinance in the ordinance that exists in your packet.
The ordinance that exists doesn't do justice for the moment.
Okay.
Before we go on, just if I could ask Mary a question.
Sure.
Mary, the ordinance that we're seeing here, is that what came out of the planning commission's, all of the work that they did on short-term rentals? Is this ordinance from 2019, what came out of that?
Yes.
That's what we did on short-term rentals.
Yes. Oh, and since we have gone past the 2 hours, if anyone needs to stand up and stretch their legs, please do it.
I might need to refill my water.
Just being, you know, for everyone's health and well-being.
And then probably get this exalted here, people talk outside.
Good job. Good job with that, Ray. I like that. Us old guys need stuff.
I'm sweating.
Sometimes I have to go potty.
I'm sitting here sweating.
See you potty.
Peanut.
Yeah.
No, because this is just one session, so, yes.
Administrative Planning Commission, hey, that's a perfect example. She's not always at the very, she's at through,
They're their best fan of baseball.
Yeah.
And they're working on the franchise record.
on the 3 properties that have been on for short-term rentals. That's where I'm going,
Where are you going?
on the 3 properties that are on. I totally disagree with the whole process.
It's exciting. We walked in.
Oh my God, I'm cold, I'm sweating, I'm like,
Huh?
Gil has a great way to go on.
There you go, yeah.
Alright.
You know, she don't come very often, she usually calls on the phone.
Next Sunday.
Yeah, she watches the recording.
She watches the recording.
Alright, let's get back to it on the short-term rentals. Eric. This is tonight's the Eric show.
So, to the best of my knowledge, we've had 3 short-term rentals in the last year come up through our process.
Is there any period board? Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
2, all 3 were outside of the ordinance. 2 were rejected, and 1 passed, and 1 still in litigation. There's
There was only 1 that was rejected, well, 2 were rejected, but one of those 2 was the ones in litigation.
Right.
But I think 3 are in operation. There's one on Front Street, I was told.
That was grandfather.
A grandfather,
No,
the Front Street.
The Front Street went down next to the fishing tackle
Yeah.
place.
Okay.
And the one up
Locust
Locust
Street,
Street was grandfather.
the far up one, up by Joanne Fritz.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
that one was grandfather.
And then the one in the 600 block of Locust.
That one was approved.
Okay.
Right. The others are grandfathered now.
The one on Cherry Street was turned down.
Right, I remember that.
So is it the ordinance or the map?
The map.
That's what I figured.
Right.
The whole thing says centers on, the wording's okay, it's the map.
Correct.
Right.
That should be easy.
Where it's allowed.
Yeah, short-term rentals, Airbnbs, not rental units, Airbnbs. They're 100% positive. I don't see, everything I've read on them, everything I see on them, is all positive. Whether you're the property owner, or you're the person using the process.
Talk to the people that live in the 700 block of Chestnut Street that have to put up with a short-term rental that comes in for, 5 days at a time, and they have 8 cars.
And none of them
And that
back in
does-
the rear.
And none of them park in the rear where their off-street parking is.
I think they're flouting they're drawing that out.
They are.
I think they're doing that on purpose.
Yes, there's more to that.
Who is doing it on purpose?
I think-
The neighbors,
No,
No,
the owner?
yeah,
no.
that's the ones that litigation.
Eric, there was an article, a municipal brief actually, in LMP from East Petersburg a few days ago. And they talked about short-term rentals in their borough. And I wanted to just bring that to your attention because they did kind of look at both sides of it. But their borough solicitor actually said, some of these, once they start turn a residential property for commercial use, they have to adhere to regulations like sprinklers and ADA laws. And are all of ours doing that? They have sprinklers in those homes?
No, not sprinklers.
Okay, because that's what they said here. And then another person took the other side of this, a council person, And he felt that he was coming up with stuff that said, pardon me until I get that part out here, that there are another side to this that people don't want, like that resident from up around the 700 block felt that it was lowering his property value because people, if he would go to sell, maybe don't want to live next to a transient property. And so there was some of that going on within the article, but it's worth reading because it kind of went back and forth with both sides of the story. So just wanted to bring that up because it was so recent that they were also talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what's our parking requirements?
2 o'clock, or 2 per. Well, that was one thing we want to talk about.
Right.
We're using the long-term rental policy for parking as a standard for short-term. And the problem is, yeah, we don't define a unit, and that's where the problem comes into effect. If we did it per bedroom, if we said one parking spot per bedroom or something like that, that would eliminate a lot of our concern. Because most properties aren't set up, you can't take a 7-bedroom house and have space for 7 cars too, you know what I mean? So that would solve a lot of our problems. But I think a well-written ordinance can control most of the problems people are concerned about. And Columbia has so much to offer the outside person, between the rivers, antique stores, shopping, downtown shopping, and everything else. This is a great community for short-term rentals. And unfortunately, really the only place you can have is downtown commercial.
I can't imagine the property over here on Cherry Street or the property up across from Mount Bethel lowering the property values of that neighborhood.
The issue on Cherry Street was there was objections to the availability of parking over there.
Well, that's the other issue. I
That
mean,
was the objection over there, and I felt that they had it covered.
They did.
I felt they had it covered.
Cherry Street was shut down, my understanding from zoning was shut down because it's technically a semi,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and our ordinance says it has to be a single.
Detached.
But that doesn't quite make sense because,
It doesn't.
but the one in the 600 block of Locust is in fact connected on one side. So,
And Chestnut Street is a single.
yeah,
So the other thing
I know, it's not adding up.
But,
I think that's a moot point.
no, and I do too.
But I think the parking is an issue. Parking is an issue in Columbia Borough, period.
Right.
So you can't allow something that's going to create more of a parking problem in the neighborhood.
But if we are inviting 2 landlords, or whatever you call them, I don't call them short-term landlords, okay, and work with them, they will work with us. You know, and to understand parking is an issue in Columbia, quite honestly, I put 7 cars out front too right now. You know what I mean? That's the big issue. It's not noise, that's control, we have ordinances control noise. You know, it's not, if the property guy's gonna stay, the difference between a short-term and a long-term renter or landlord is the only way that short-term stays in business is by great reviews. So they can't let their property go down in value. They can't, you know, people are gonna rent off somebody with holes in the walls and everything else. We can put age limits. I saw other municipalities have age limits for minimum age rental. You know, we can do stuff like that.
When the mayor said about midpoint about the detached and so forth, do you mean because they've already gone through the process? Because this clearly says it's to be detached.
No, I don't think whether it's detached or not detached.
So you're
saying different.
Okay, I do. I don't like the semis being included in this, but And I,
Directly attached to some
yeah,
neighbor.
and I'm not quite sure why then it says detached in here if we've already granted 2 of them. I mean, I'm sorry, go on.
One was granted.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah, Cherry Street wasn't.
Right.
Yeah.
But, you know, the development of the industrial park out there. If I live in that neighborhood, that's gonna be a hotbed for opportunity for short-term rentals.
A lot of those homes are single too.
Yeah, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
I'm just
detached.
picking a neighborhood and saying, you know, that would be a prime area because we don't have hotels in Columbia. It's going to be transit service for people to come and go. There's potential for university places out there which would bring students in or parents in. You know, there's going to be a lot of opportunity out in that neighborhood for this type of thing.
If we are going to change the map, I would like to see some sort of limit on number allowed in a certain area. Because what you don't want is you don't want to have a whole neighborhood filled with nothing but short-term rentals.
Can I ask you why? Not really smart, but
Because-
let's take the beach, let's take any beachfront in America as an example. They're all short-term rentals, and it's the most expensive area in the world. So, how can you say it would hurt you?
We're not a beach community.
That's right, we got a river down here.
Well, we're a river
You
community.
don't want your, when people choose to buy in a beach town, they choose to buy for that reason. When people choose to buy in a small town, they do it for that small town feel. And if the majority of the people around them are not homeowners,
No,
because
they're coming for that small town.
right, they're coming for that small town feel, but how is it a small town feel if all of the neighbors are different every week? It's not a small town feel.
Well, and you're right, Heather, because part of what was said at East Petersburg was that it drives, short-term rentals drive out single-family home ownership. That's what they were talking about over there, so.
I mean, that's just, I don't know a whole lot of short-term rentals that, you know, every week the people are gonna be, you know, the whole neighborhood's different every week.
Well, if you go to detached, that cuts down on a whole lot of homes. If you go to one parking space per bedroom, that cuts down a little further. So you may stratify things just by those things in your ordinance, rather than saying X amount per block.
Right, I hate regulating that kind of stuff. I tell one person you're allowed to do it, another person, sorry, you're not allowed to do it, I just have a problem with that.
I'm with you there. I think if we make the parking issue go away, every bedroom has to have a parking space. That's gonna eliminate so many, you're not gonna have a whole block full of short-term rentals.
You could have one out by McGinnis.
Potentially, but then just let the free market decide that. Let people be free to do what they want.
I agree. I don't know if this really needs a whole lot of work. There's a whole lot of work put into this. Most comprehensive, and I think it's working. We've gone through a few requests. The system is working, the policy is working, and I agree. Let's look at the parking aspect of it. That's a great suggestion. One parking space per bedroom, because I think you can anticipate a 4-bedroom house having 4 couples coming to stay. I think that it's fair to assume that.
I mean, there's other regulations beside that already. Bathrooms and stuff like that. So, it's not like every house on the street is gonna start selling out and doing this. But for the ones that can,
They're not gonna be held back.
the parking will control some of them, the rest of them will have that opportunity. But it's also gonna raise value because the short-term rentals do well in Columbia. Then those few houses that are able to do it are gonna add value to them.
There are large properties in Columbia, down the lower end here, that are not owner-occupied properties anymore because of the expanse of them. But they could be a wonderful investment for a short-term rental. And what's happening today is they're becoming rental property, where it will be much more attractive to have those properties turned into short-term rentals, bed and breakfast, down in this area. And it would surely would make it more attractive in I'll say, old Columbia.
Hey, we want to talk about Old Columbia. At one time, there was a lot of hotels down there.
Okay. But I mean, you take some of the properties over here, 200 Rock and Cherry,
Absolutely.
2nd Street, there are properties there that it's a stretch to try to, Doc Denny's place, you know, that's a stretch to try to buy that house and maintain that house. There aren't that many people willing to do that. But there probably is someone willing to take that property and turn it into a short-term rental, bed and breakfast, and it'll be an attractive house rather than a 5-unit apartment complex.
Currently, the ordinance is stating a minimum of 2 off-street parking spaces.
Right.
So if you go by the bedrooms, you're increasing the number of parking spaces that they can have.
Right.
That they would have to
They must
provide.
Right.
And the way this is written, there can't be more than 2 persons in a bedroom. They have to follow all our current ordinance with the rental. And Lancaster City just made some changes to theirs that they define their short-term rental. Some of the stipulations on that it has to be registered, it has to be inspected prior to registration. With us, property manager must be identified, name of contact, blah, blah, blah. Length of any stay shall be 30 consecutive days. They can't stay for more than 30 days. The entire dwelling must be rented in the name of one individual who represents the entire family or group. The number of guests in one party shall not exceed 2 adults per bedroom. No exterior or interior sign intended to be seen by the public shall be permitted. And they just added that the dwelling unit must qualify as a single-family home or apartment as defined in Chapter 300, blah, 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 of their zoning ordinance. So if it's a single-family home or apartment and meets that definition, it's allowed. When you go into their permitted uses, they're permitted in, let's just say they are not permitted in residential detached dwellings. There are 1 district, which is a residential detached dwelling, and R2, which is a residential semi-detached dwelling, and R3, residential medium density, or R4, residential high density dwellings and commercial services. So they're limited in where they're allowed within the city of Lancaster also, and I'm using my voice.
No, I believe ours is probably similar to theirs.
It's very similar to this.
And as far as their city versus our borough, it's probably ratio-wise pretty similar.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying, we were at that level, and I'm thinking we need to expand and become better. But again, expanding is not bad if we control it through the ordinance.
Right. And we had back in February, CEDC had sent a letter, and they were advocating for some changes to the short-term rental, and they were looking that it would be allowed in the downtown commercial district also, as opposed to where it is now located. And if it went into the downtown commercial, I'm trying to think of Cherry Street, if that would have fallen.
Yes, it would have.
Within that, I think it would have.
Yes, it would have.
And, so to advocate for the downtown commercial, I think like your properties down in that 200 block of Cherry Street, properties down on Walnut Street, because I think we extended our downtown commercial over to Walnut Street. So I think looking at the map, change, and as has been stated, and looking at the parking being linked to the bedrooms is part of the tweak that needs done to that to make it. What we really need is that hotel to happen, to keep on in town.
Going with that, I don't know.
But the hotel is going to benefit equally to the short-term rentals.
Right.
Because people who come in to Columbia on a short-term rental like the place and find a hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Or vice versa, they come to the
Right.
hotel, like the place, come to a short-term rental.
We've got so much to offer in this town.
Exactly.
And to keep people in this town, not just coming for a day and then going off somewhere else.
River Park, every weekend, you see 70 cars from Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Virginia.
I talk to people from all over town.
None of them can stay for a night in Columbia.
Right.
Based on that downtown commercial, I can't help but think of places over on Chestnut Street, in the 300, 400 block of Chestnut, 500 block of Chestnut. The house across the street from UMP, the old Long Funeral, that's them out, but to me, they're perfect places for that.
Yeah.
Well, the Chestnut Street, that's the medium density residential
That
business.
is in there.
That's where it is.
Those
That's where
places,
they're allowed.
that's where they're allowed.
No, where? Over there, yeah, but not up there.
No,
Not
not
up
up,
9th Street.
not up to 9th Street.
Yeah.
So Eric, would you remove all of would you allow it in any of the zoning districts? Not industrial though. We don't want.
No.
Now,
Obviously, we
it
don't.
would be industrial. But again, I hate to say this, but if the industrial park goes and takes it away, and a hotel chain wants to come in out there,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? How do you stop it? So,
Well, we don't know what zoning district that's going to be in, because we could actually write that into the zoning ordinance for that,
right.
whatever we're having.
There are a lot of industrial parks. Just went through one this weekend. A lot of industrial parks that you'll see a hotel pop up.
Yeah.
Because all the people are coming here for seminars and that.
Well, wait a minute. A hotel is different than a short-term
Now it's
rental.
not,
A short-term rental is a single unit.
yeah. Hotels are short-term.
Well, yeah, but it's classified different. What we're regulating is one residential unit.
No, I mean,
Family dwelling.
you may see different kinds of housing out there.
Right, and that's fine,
Okay.
but
So-
that would not fall under the short.
No.
So yes, there is some areas. You don't want to do industrial. You don't want,
Well, and by right, that, the industrial would be out anyway because there's no residents
right.
in the industrial
And that's
so,
pretty much what you
yeah.
want to have. You take your river park area and stuff, has never got homes on it again. So, yeah, they would be part of it, but outside of that, I think anywhere in Columbia.
So you would change all these N's to P's. And the only way they would have to go to the zoning hearing board is if they did not meet these requirements.
Right.
But where we would regulate with the parking,
Because even once you get past all that, it still comes down to code inspection, regulation, and then continuous follow-up with regulations.
You can make short-term rentals allowed anywhere in Columbia Borough by special exception.
Right, and that's what I was.
Then they gotta come to zoning, and with the criteria on that, if the neighborhood objects to it, it doesn't happen. So they all have to go to zoning, pure zoning, and then it's all done by special exception.
Right.
Not just by right.
That's where I want to go with it, yes.
okay. I would do that.
Yeah.
So none of them are P's, they're all SE.
Let's see, that was the note I have from our March meeting.
Right. That's how far back was it? Yeah.
Now, but we can't tell the zoning hearing board that if the neighbors object, they have to deny it.
No.
Because they're their own body.
Right.
So how do we guarantee
If your zoning hearing board is educated properly, there's criteria that have to be met in order to grant a special exception or a variance.
Right.
And one of those criteria is how the neighbors react. That's why you gotta post any zoning change on the property for so long, so that the neighbors have a chance to come in and speak their piece.
All right, or is there anything else?
Heather, just to throw it out, some little notes here. This was a follow-up to this CEDC. The special exception conditional use, there would be an owner residency requirement.
Yeah.
That there would possibly be distance, that you wouldn't have them on top of one another. All zones permitted, annual inspection, bedrooms, equal parking. Those were some of the suggestions that came out of that March meeting. I know Mark asked me for notes or anything.
I know a lot of the people that I talked to up at the conference that had short-term rental ordinances existing all had that the owner has to live on site thing.
And
yeah, I know, right?
I don't necessarily agree with that.
I don't
It's not
agree
tasteful to me.
No, I don't agree with that at all, but
it doesn't so much.
That's like me renting a room from someone's house.
I think that the agreement was
There's
that
privacy there.
they live within a certain radius.
That's
of
a big-
what they
Right.
would
Oh, no, see, ours, the people I talked to, they all had all
Ours already said that, done it. We didn't do it in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30 minutes.
Us or the
Mary, I
property manager.
property manager, I did it in 30 minutes.
Yeah, going to what Leo said, at that time, I remember talking about doesn't the neighbors get a say? And I remember being told that no, the neighbors can't come in and get a say as to whether or not.
You're right.
They can speak up though.
What it
Yeah,
is,
they can at the Zoom.
what it is, if we open up some of these criteria and just say they can come in there, then they can come in there as long as they meet the road requirements. What we're saying is we're making a special exception so they can come in, but they have to go through zoning, and therefore zoning gives the residents an opportunity to challenge it.
Right.
I agree with all of them.
Yeah, I do too. I like that
It
too.
didn't make much sense at first, but this is making pretty good sense.
Yeah.
I was saying that's your sidewalk Saturdays.
Remember, it's not chips and stone.
Yeah.
If you do something that doesn't work, you make a change.
Yeah, all right, so who is, you want to mark up that ordinance and give it to Mark and to have
Yeah.
Chairman rework some of that and bring it back to us at a later thing? All right, and then next, the sidewalk Saturdays, this is Todd's ball game.
Yeah, sure.
Can I say something real quick? Sure. So I wasn't sure initially what you were talking about at the last meeting. But when I got home and thought about it, all the I lost my mind. Okay. I am. Barbara, we just worked on here for the last 2 years. The comp plan. This is exactly what the comp plan's about. This is everything. So, unfortunately, we don't have a comp plan yet to go over with everybody. But what you're stating here, what you're saying, will come out in the comp plan and it'll make sense.
So we even talk about sidewalks now.
Well, yeah, talk about it. I'm saying.
Well, I had this idea for some time now. I'm not going to belabor this or anything. It is getting late. You all can take this home and just think about it. I'll just go over it real quick, but I was thinking, for a long time, I love it when there's a snowstorm in town, like a big snowstorm. It's about the only time I get to see Jake. Right, Jake? But it's the only time I get to see my neighbors sometimes, right? We're all out shoveling, helping each other, talking, and taking each other's cars out. And then after the snowstorm, everybody's in their house and staying warm, and the summer they're staying cool. You don't see that. I'm really big on community. And to have community, you got to commute.
Thank you.
Right? So how do you get folks that live right next door out talking to each other? The community. Well, I think setting aside a time, a day, like the sidewalk Saturdays. I have noted down here the idea of having maybe every other Saturday, having it from 7 to 9 in the morning and 7 to 9 in the evening. So whenever you're home, you can participate in your own sidewalk Saturday with your neighbors. The goals are to encourage neighbors to share life together here in the borough, bring awareness to the importance of being outdoors, get people outside, cold or hot, doesn't matter. It's a community-wide, our town activity, right? Also, let's encourage people to sweep their sidewalks. Sweep up the sidewalk, clean your front of your house, and maybe pull some trash out of the gutters. I also think it's an incentive to stop, to reduce litter. Hey, I just clean my sidewalk. What do you throw trash on my sidewalk for, right? Bringing pride in your home, right? You don't have to be a homeowner. If you rent, that's your home. It's not your house, it's your home. Pride in your home. Also, maybe would encourage some kind of neighborhood watch activity, right? Neighbors looking out for neighbors, getting to know each other, caring for one another. Again, some ideas every other Saturday throughout the year. Twice on that Saturday, so people who work in the mornings can participate in the evening, and vice versa. Promote sidewalk sweeping, having special sidewalk Saturday event days like chalk drawing day, or plant a flower out front day, or share a story day with your neighbor. Maybe yard sales. We talked. Leo suggested earlier, yard sales. Maybe there's yard sales on different sidewalks.
When you're done, I want to talk.
Each Saturday, right? So you can go explore other people's sidewalks.
Right.
Beautification, improvement, participation awards, perhaps for your neighborhood. Encourage people to visit sidewalks in other parts of town. If you name your own sidewalks, right? Neighborhood sidewalk competitions or something. I don't know. Just crazy ideas. How it would be implemented? Maybe through Parks and Rec, I don't know. Maybe just a simple resolution that we adopt and say, this is it, it's going to happen. And it just kind of regulates itself, or perhaps maybe like a community-like committee. An example is Columbia Cat Action Team. responsible people stepped up and took over and have done well. So that was my simple idea. I don't know how much.
Well, your neighbor Barry McCarty, he might be going over the top, but look at what he did the last couple of years with his block party, with the amount of people that have been here, just walking around talking. I mean, oh my God, I was sitting on Pete's porch. You know, people
I don't know.
you know, but, and you know, talking to people. Yeah, I think it's a great idea and something that can grow. With that, I was talking to Mark today about yard sale. My dearly departed friend Barry Ford spoke about this years and years ago. We should have a community-wide yard sale.
Disagree with you.
Wait a minute. Community-wide yard sale. Once a year, maybe twice a year, spring and fall, or just in the spring. If you have it in the spring, you have it just prior to spring cleanup. So anything left over can be getting rid of cleanup day. It's going to bring thousands of people into your town. It's going to promote a lot of business. It's going to keep a lot of signs off the buildings, off the poles and everything else. And it's going to have a lot of people walking around town, talking to neighbors and everything else. Barry Ford talked about that years ago.
Okay, so I do agree with that, except for the comp plan coming out that is big, is built on neighborhoods. We want to go back to the way neighborhoods today.
I don't have a problem with cutting it down to neighborhoods.
What I'd rather see is neighborhood yard sales. That way other neighborhoods can shop.
Well, I don't have a problem, Eric, I have no problem with that whatsoever, but I mean large group yard sales in area. I think there was one I wasn't home, but I heard there was one on Chestnut Street last week.
Not as big as they used to be. They used to be advertised.
Todd usually has a big thing out.
But I heard there was one. Yeah, but I don't have a problem with that, community, if that's what you want, fine. If you want to do in certain neighborhoods, that's fine with me, but I think that's a way to get this all moving, started. And I like the idea of at least in around that spring cleanup time where you can tie it all in together. But spring and fall, Barry Ford talked about this for years. He said, Leo, why don't we do this? I go over to Elm Yard sale.
Yeah.
Man, I walk a mile and a half, 2 miles up at, and places packed with people.
No, I do agree with that. But I think the neighborhood.
I have no problem with that.
But is it up to us to dictate when this neighborhood is gonna have a yard sale, and shouldn't it be up to the neighborhood to decide, hey, let's all get together and have a yard sale on, these 3 blocks?
Well, I think
that's kind of what Chestnut Street did.
I think it's up to us to encourage it.
And so regulate.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you, municipalities, it's part of that yard sale. You can't do it alone.
Well, you should have your fire police, you should have your officers aware that it's going to happen.
Right, you want control. There may be food trucks there and stuff like that.
Yeah, but, I don't want to be the one sitting here saying, okay, on such and such, on the 3rd Saturday in May, this neighborhood is going to have a neighborhood yard sale. No, I don't.
I would love that. I would love that on a calendar so that I can look.
Well, I would say it would be the borough to encourage,
Wednesday.
if you're going to do that, if you're going to do that, give us a call and put it on the calendar.
Right, exactly.
I consider being something about like Columbia Cat Action Team, a community-led effort. And we support it.
Right.
Yeah, I'd like to go. I can't do it all in one day, so I like that idea.
Well, again, this goes back to the neighborhood concept that they came up with.
How's that fit the comp plan?
It does.
I love it. It's great. And that's the whole.
Like Eric said, you do it by neighborhood. What is it, like 5 or 6 neighborhoods?
Yeah, something like that. Go back to old school too. That's what they did back then. That's the story I hear. Neighborhoods fought neighborhoods.
You come out of the wrong era.
Oh, that's a rumble.
I come out of the live or die era.
Oh, my gosh. All
We're
right.
one fast.
Anything else on the sidewalk Saturdays? Or now, that what it's called?
Yeah,
Yeah, good.
I don't know what we do with it from here. Maybe talk
I don't
about it
either.
again in another future work session,
Yeah.
give some thought.
I think this we talked about.
Do it at a full meeting where you have more than 10, you know, you might have more than 40 minutes.
Okay.
Tonight is, you had a meeting that you lost when you went to committee of the whole.
Yes, it is.
You had a chance to brainstorm.
Yep.
Gotta have them every now and then.
Yep. All right, let's do Borough Council comments. Mr. Stahl. Councilperson Price.
I have something for Jake, which I did not know I had, but I checked my messages. A resident asked me what was going on with weed spraying today on Locust Street. I didn't see that happening. He said someone was spraying for weeds.
I was aware of that.
No one saw it happen.
No one saw it happen?
No one knows what happened.
Oh, okay.
Leave it at that.
Okay. Now, the other thing I just wanted to mention very quickly is that yesterday, the Columbia Cat Action Team was able to get 2 adult cats to go through the TNR process, and we also took 3 kittens off the street yesterday too. So they are at Columbia Animal Shelter. So that's good news for us, for everybody really. Thank you.
Councilperson Ballmer.
I spoke nothing.
Councilperson Fisher.
Nothing.
And I have nothing either. How was your experience with the storm centers? The cop left. The cop bailed out.
One thing. I'm sure no one will object if you have a comment you would like to make regarding things that are being talked about, especially in these ordinances and things like that.
Right.
You know, you have a perspective on policing and public safety that you can bring into some of those comments.
Right.
I wasn't interested in hearing about the short-term rental stuff.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If there's something that
You-
you feel should
Are you
feel free to
are you
talk.
guys seeing any issues with the short-term rentals that we currently have?
The way the regulations are involved, I don't think there will be a problem. You're gonna have responsible people, you know, just keep the party people out.
Yeah. That's the concern. Yeah, I know.
But they're so regulated nationally that if they happen one time, it's not gonna happen again.
Correct.
I don't know where it goes there.
And I have nothing this evening either. So the announcement of the next meeting at 7 p.m. on July 11th, 2023. Council will hold a regularly scheduled meeting. Could I have a motion to adjourn? Oh, geez, okay, and who seconded that? I have a motion by Councilperson Price, second by Councilperson Leonard, to adjourn at 10:03 p.m. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? That's a wrap. Holy jeez. She's doing